Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is story about what if Naruto uses wrong jutsu and teleported in Justice League Part 1. Before I start, please do support for more amazing content and comments for Part 2. Do consider to subscribe my channel and share my video to your friends and check out the description as well. Let's start the video. Night. Watchtower. The surface of the moon appeared as brilliant as always, showering the earth with a silvery radiance, but on this particularly warm and unusually peaceful day, the moon was glowing even more dazzlingly. It was as if the celestial body was almost quivering with barely concealed excitement and anticipation. Anticipation of what? No one knew. This kind of spectacle had been reported to transpire every 2 centuries in the history of the world, making it a must-see for everyone. All the inhabitants of the earth were no doubt transfixed on the glowing surface of the moon. The floating station of the Earth's mightiest heroes was hovering peacefully around the planet. Superman and Batman were standing near the edge of the tower and gazing at the wonderful and peaceful glow of the moon through the glass windows. It wasn't always like this, with their lives and crime-fighting duties, it was practically impossible to see such sights. "It's quite peaceful tonight," Batman voiced softly, a complete opposite of his grumpy and serious voice, as he gazed at the glowing moon. "It sure is." Superman nodded with a small smile. "I hope some idiotic villain doesn't take this as an opportunity to launch an attack and ruin the moment." "That would be quite annoying indeed." The Cape Dark Knight agreed. "Clark, I was hoping to have a word with you regarding the sidekicks." Clark chuckled when he heard the oddly funny name, sidekick, considering one could easily mistake for a form of kick. "Yeah, what about them?" "They are getting quite impatient. I was thinking of forming a team consisting of them with one of us as their superior," Bruce stated with a grimace, recalling the last time Robin had ranted to him about not keeping his promise. "The missions will be given by whoever is designated to be in charge of them, making it essentially our duty to give them missions suitable to their talents, missions where they cannot be harmed." "You've really thought this through, haven't you?" Clark asked with a knowing smile. "Hard not to when an impatient teenager is screaming in your ears 24/7, Batman grumbled. Clark chuckled good-naturedly. Bruce joined in after a few seconds, not able to keep his amusement hidden from the Man of Steel. "I think it would be a great idea. We are not getting any younger, one day we'll have to relinquish our duties to them. With the establishment of this team, they will gradually grow accustomed to the duty of fighting crime." Clark agreed. "They would require a base of operation. I think our former headquarters, Mount Justice, would suffice." "I agree." "What would be the name of the team? Sidekick Justice or something?" Superman asked with a grin. "No need to be funny, Clark, this is serious," Batman retorted with a scowl. "Lighten up a little, Bruce." "I'm always lightened up," Bruce commented sarcastically, causing Superman to give him a strange look. "That was a very weird comeback from someone like you." The Dark Knight glared daggers at the grinning Superman. "In any case, I think Young Justice would be an appropriate name, considering they are teenagers." Overhearing a snort from his side, he spun around with a glare and saw Clark whistling innocently. "You have a problem with the name, Clark?" "Nope." "Good, Young Justice it is then." "Who will supervise them?" Clark asked with a cough, getting over the funny name. "We'll discuss that in the upcoming meeting, which also reminds me we should get moving lest we arrive late. I don't know about you, but I don't want my reputation to take a hit by being late to a meeting." Batman started for the gate and looked over his shoulder at the prone figure of Superman, gazing at the moon intently. "Something the matter, Clark?" "No, just wondering why the moon is shaking." Bruce gave him a strange look, prompting Clark to explain. "You can't see it because you don't have enhanced eyesight. But it just may be my imagination." "Let's go before I summon a doctor to examine your head," Batman stated bluntly and walked out from the room, followed by a frowning Superman. "What was that distortion I was seeing?" The Man of Steel gave the glowing moon one last look and walked out of the room, deep in thought. Inside the moon. A solitary figure was striding through a dimly lit intricate corridor, adorned with dazzling stones and crystals of distinctive shades deep inside the moon. The figure was a commandingly giant and muscular brown-haired male garbed in a golden and crimson armor. The armor was consisting of 2 golden shoulder pads, a gleaming crimson chest piece covering his torso, golden wristbands wrapped around his hands up to his elbows, leaving his muscular arms bare, and a set of black boots covering his feet. Under the armor, a black coat with black pants could be seen. The giant male did not pay any attention to his shuddering surrounding, dutifully concentrating on a glowing massive gate at the end of the corridor. The door was crimson in color with a colossal tree design engraved on it. The figure quickened his pace when the door glowed even brightly, lighting the whole corridor in a blinding red. The tall figure reached the gate just as the light reduced considerably and vanished slowly. Without knocking on the door, the brown-haired man calmly pushed the massive door away and entered cautiously. The inside of the room was pretty simple than the outside, considering it was located in another dimension. The room itself was filled with every kind of dark color stretching as far as the eyes could see, with a large circular black bed floating in the middle. Reaching the center of the room, the figure kneeled as the bed slowly floated down and touched the distorted floor with a soft thud. "Sire, it's time for you to awaken," the tall man stated firmly and maintained his kneeling posture with one hand on his chest and the other on the ground in servitude. A soft groan was heard followed by the sound of movements of the bed sheets as the stoic figure tensed in anticipation, the ground underneath trembling even harder as it waited for the master to wake up. A large humanoid hand followed by two similar feet peeked out of the black covers as the aforementioned master slowly peeled the sheets off his body and sat up. Sliding towards the edge of the bed, the man's feet touched the ground as he stood up to an intimidating height. As soon as his feet came into contact with the surface, the trembling and shuddering of the moon ceased altogether as if finally in peace. "Has it been 2 centuries already, Oaken?" The deep resounding voice of the tall man snapped the kneeling figure known as Oaken out of his dazed state as he looked at his master. The man, seemingly in his mid-20s, was very tall, standing at an abnormal 8 feet 3 inch height with a magnificently muscular body, stone-like bulging biceps, and broad muscular torso. Silky blood-red hair let loose over his back reaching up to the back of his knees, with thin bangs draped over the two sides of his ethereal face. Twin diamond-like narrow blue eyes filled with concealed amusement and mirth gazed at the kneeling servant. He was dressed in a black sleeping robe with the buttons on the chest undone, revealing his chiseled nude torso. The most attention-grabbing feature about the giant man was the 2 black horns adorned atop his head like a majestic crown. Oaken shivered from the sheer potency of his presence alone. No matter how many millennia he had spent serving his master, he still found it hard to even breathe in his presence. The tall stature and the physical perfection of his body along with his piercing blue eyes and majestic black horns demanded nothing but absolute servitude. What made him even more obedient to his master was his kindness and his generous heart. The power he possessed in his pinky could wipe out an entire planet in the blink of an eye, yet his heart was filled with nothing but kindness. All this time he had spent with him, never once had he demanded anything from any of his guards or anyone else. "Yes, Millard," the now identified Oaken responded obediently. "No need to be so formal, Oaken, you can simply call me Naruto," the tall Riti chuckled softly. "My apologies, sire, but I simply cannot address you short of what you truly deserve," Oaken stated loyally. Naruto shook his head, realizing it was futile to change his mind. The man was stubborn that way, even more so than his eldest son. "Well, seeing as I can't change your mind, I believe I should probably take a shower before we get to the matters of the world," the master of the palace stated calmly and moved towards the left side of the infinite room, the wall distorting away to reveal a spacious bathing chamber. "As you wish, sire. I'll depart and notify the chefs to prepare a feast for you." Oaken gave one last bow and left the chamber. An hour later, Naruto exited the bathroom dressed in a red skin-tight shirt, a long red coat with large red and black tree design on the back, reaching to his knees, black leather pants with a brown belt and red combat boots with metal guards reaching up to his knees. Draped over his broad shoulders was a large crimson fur cap with 2 red shoulder pads and red metal wristbands up to his elbows. He looked around his personal chamber and softly shook his head in resignation. Oaken was already there kneeling on the ground with his head bowed. "Your Eminence, the chefs have prepared the feast and are awaiting your arrival." "At ease, Oaken. Let us go." Naruto smiled kindly and walked out of the room with such grace and elegance, it looked as if he was gliding over the surface. Oaken nodded and followed after his master stoically. Naruto strolled through the crystal palace towards the large dining room followed by Oaken, the doors of the room sliding away to reveal the dining chamber. The inside of the room was quite simple but large, with a great crimson gem hanging from the ceiling, bathing the whole room in a red hoe, and a large table with spacious crystal chairs in the middle of the room. Naruto entered the dining room followed by Oaken. The standing chef snapped into attention and bowed their heads as Naruto walked up to his chair and sat down. The table was filled with every type of food a man could desire, a meal befitting of a king. The chefs had really outdone themselves. Seeing as Oaken stood beside his chair and the chefs excused themselves from the room, he smiled softly. "Oaken, my boy, sit down and tell me all about the world situation during my slumber." "Sire, my place is to stand beside you, not consider myself as your equal," the stoic man exclaimed. Oaken. Naruto started calmly, "How many times do I have to tell you to not use formalities with me? We are long past that stage. Sit down and eat. This meal is more than I can eat." "As you wish, Millard." "It seems the world has changed far more than I had anticipated," Naruto commented lightly as he floated to his throne room. They had eaten their meal with the usual dilemma of Naruto trying and failing to make Oaken stop calling him sire and all those formal names. Oaken had explained the situation of the world below, and Naruto had to admit it was far more complicated and worse than before. The throne room was situated at the back of the palace at the top floor, facing the vast landscape and forest inside the moon. The outside of the moon could be seen as nothing but a round silver bowl of sand and stones, but on the inside, it was a land of lush and green grass and dense forests, stretching as far as the eye could see with large blue lakes and rivers. Naruto had collected any and all endangered species of animals and plants and had nurtured them in the moon. You could find any kind of animals and plants your heart desired, from animals as small as ants to as tall as skyscrapers. The 2-story tall sentinels covered in golden armor from head to toe with enormous axes, standing at the door of the throne room, bowed to the king and opened the great golden gates with vines-like designs engraved on it. The gates opened to reveal a dimly lit large hall-like room with a crystal staircase leading up to a pedestal in the middle of the room, where a large crimson throne was situated. The room had gold and blood-red pillars located in a row to the sides, with a large red carpet leading to the front of the stairs. The wall behind the throne was a clear red transparent glass, lighting the throne room in a dim red hue and enabling the king to watch over his domain. Made from gleaming black and red crystals with a modified cushion and 2 circular globes as armrest, the throne was a work of art itself. Naruto floated through the large room, up the stairs to his throne and sat down, while Oken stood beside the large throne stoically. Yes, the heroes try their best to subdue the villains, but make a critical error of judgment in the end. Would I be correct in assuming that these villains are sent to some kind of containment structures instead of being dealt with? Yes, sire. The villains are sent to jails to atone for their crimes. While the heroes' decisions to leave them at the hands of the government are noble, it's their belief in second chances that eludes me, Oken explained calmly. I believe it's their desire to not become executioners, considering themselves to be below the law, Naruto explained calmly and revolved the throne around to gaze out of the large window at his vast domain. Well, it's a very honorable quality, on the other hand, it's their greatest weakness. From what you have informed me about these criminals, many of them have one reason or another for committing transgressions, and while I don't approve of foul play, they at least have a purpose for doing what they do. And the others? Oken inquired interestedly. His master always had a distinctive outlook and way of thinking than others regarding many issues of the world. The others basically commit crime for the fun of it. This Joker character for instance is undeserving of second chances, regardless of the tragedies of his past. Their show of mercy regarding some of these villains is admirable, but the rest needs to be dealt with permanently. Regrettably, that is one action this band of heroes cannot seem to take, the tall man stated with a small frown, while Naruto smiled softly. What is the name of this band of heroes? It's called the Justice League. An interesting name, ironic even. They referred themselves as the upholders of justice, yet refused to kill for the sake of justice, the redhead voiced out with a subtle hint of amusement. They wouldn't happen to operate from that floating station in Earth's orbit, would they? Affirmative, Your Highness, they call it the Watchtower, a place where they can protect the Earth from both outside and inside threats, the brown-haired man replied dutifully. Naruto hummed in thought and eyed a small bird feeding an even smaller hatchling in a massive tree outside the Crystal Palace. Oken, what would you say to the concept of me consolidating with this group of heroes? The redeeted king asked curiously, without looking at his devoted right-hand man. He knew that the stoical man appeared to be mulling it over, obviously searching for appropriate words to both answer the question and not offend him. Seeing as he couldn't come up an appropriate answer, Oken bowed slightly and replied, my opinion on the matter is of no importance, sire. My job is to follow and serve you. Naruto chuckled softly and shook his head in resignation. It's settled then, I would join this band to see what the world is like now and to cut a few loose ends. Now if you'll excuse me, I need to study the present world. As you wish, sire. Watchtower, conference room. This meeting is hereby called to order, Batman announced as he, Superman and Wonder Woman stood in front of a large U-shaped table in the watchtower high above the earth. All the members of the Justice League were in attendance, sitting around the table, from the senior members up to the most recent members. The objective of the conference is to think over the prospect of an undercover squad involving the sidekicks. Wonder Woman began. As all of you know, there are certain problems that goes right under our noses, create situations that we cannot solve with sheer brute strength or power alone, situations that require information that needs to be gathered before it can be solved. The purpose of the team will be to gather info and deal with small problems, the Man of Steel continued where Diana had left. The 3 senior members returned to their seats as the meeting began. While the formation of such teams certainly has merit, it would need a base of operation and supervision from one of us, Aquaman stated loudly and looked around the table for agreement. Superman has petitioned our former headquarters to be an appropriate base of operation for the team. As for the designation of a supervisor, we will vote on it, Batman responded evenly. I volunteer as a supervisor. Captain Marvel raised his hand pleasantly. Working with boys almost his age would be fun. The Justice League members, while powerful and unique, were far too stiff and uptight in his opinion. We will take it into consideration, Superman stated firmly. Name of the team? Flash asked curiously and raised an eyebrow when he saw Superman trying to mask his amusement. Was the Man of Steel actually trying not to grin? The name couldn't be that bad, could it? Young Justice the Dark Knight replied and directed a discreet glare at an innocently smiling Superman. If no one has anything to say, I believe it's time to vote. All oppose. No one raised their hands. The formation of the team had more ups than downs. All in favor? Everyone raised their hands at once. Batman nodded in approval. It's decided. Team Young Justice is hereby formed. Now for the designation of a supervisor, I myself will be handing out missions appropriate to their talents. We need someone to supervise them. Any volunteers? I volunteer to be their supervisor, Red Tornado said in his monotone robotic voice. Good, now we. Incoming transmission. A robotic voice interjected as a wide screen appeared in front of the Leaguers and showed the image of a black-haired female, the attendant of the Justice League Earthly base Catherine. Sorry to interrupt, but a red-haired man calling himself Destiny seeks an audience with the Justice League. Motives? Batman asked seriously. Unknown. Where is he? Superman asked curiously. Who would intentionally want an audience with the League? Sitting in the waiting room in the Hall of Justice. Alright, meeting adjourned for now. The rest will be discussed upon our return along with this new individual. I, Wonder Woman and Superman will go and meet this Destiny character, Batman declared seriously and stood up from his chair. The Man of Steel and Wonder Woman followed after the Dark Knight as he stepped into the Zeta Beam tube. Hall of Justice, DC. Superman, Wonder Woman and Batman paced into the waiting room and saw a tall and muscular red-haired man in his mid-20s, wearing a crimson skin-tight shirt, black leather pants with 2 red lines and red combat boots reaching up to his knees. He was wearing a long blood-red cap kept on his shoulders by 2 shoulder pads and red segmented wristbands reaching up to his elbows. His long silky blood-red hair was stretching up to the small of his back, while 2 thin bangs hung over his narrow blue eyes. All in all, he was quite intimidating and admittedly otherworldly handsome. The tall red-headed man walked up to them as soon as they entered the room and smiled softly. Greetings. My name is Naruto Uzumaki, a pleasure to meet you. Diana eyed the strange man with a judicious gaze as he walked forward. His voice deep but soft, a calm and ethereal handsome face and a stride full of confidence and conviction, bore a resemblance to that of a royal blood. The sheer potency of his presence demanded respect, even she. A princess herself could not deny the self-conscious thoughts about being disrespectful in his presence into surface. What truly caught her attention were the 2 wristbands and abnormally heavy pressure in the room. The wristbands were similar to the bracelets worn by her and her sisters, as well as the Queen. Though they resembled the ones worn by the Queen and her, except red in color and segmented. She would have to ask about that later on. Superman, being the kind-hearted man that he was, simply smiled at the red-head and tried to ignore the sudden appearance of an unknown force weighing down on his shoulders. He didn't need his superior Kryptonian intellect or his enhanced sight to know that this man was not normal by any sense of the word. Batman on the other hand was already trying to analyze the newcomer and find his weakness, but was unfortunately being met with failure. This man left nothing uncovered or exposed to be exploited, not mention he was too friendly. Judging from the name, which was another surprise since all heroes and heroines kept their real names a secret, he was obviously from either Japan or China, but his style of dress, regal facial features and fluent English presented a completely different picture. A pleasure to meet you, Naruto. I'm Diana of Paradise Island, as you may already know, this is Superman and Batman. Wonder Woman greeted with a polite smile and extended her hand. I have to say I'm honored by your presence. Naruto smiled and shook hands with the 3 members. Such an impressive grip, the black-haired heroine thought in surprise when she shook hands with the red-head. The strength of the grip reminded her of the time she had hand-wrestled Superman, which was saying something considering the man was well Superman. Now that the formalities are out of the way, can you tell us why you wanted an audience with the Justice League? Batman asked with his eyes narrowed behind the cowl. The red-headed king couldn't help but smile at the cautious man who was trying to intimidate him. Simple, I want to join the Justice League. The 3 members were surprised to say the least. Normally, when a new hero would spring up and get the attention of the League, he would be given the opportunity to join the League, or if a sidekick was nominated and voted to be a part of the League. No one had ever volunteered to join the League before. Why? The ever-paranoid Batman asked suspiciously with a glare while Superman sighed. Can't he just give the guy a chance? I didn't realize I required a reason to save innocent lives, Naruto smiled softly, not the least bit intimidated by the Batman glare, quite the contrary in fact. The Dark Knight, however, was not convinced by his supposedly noble actions and friendly act at all. He had seen far too friendly people later revealed to be serial killers. Who was to say that this one wouldn't turn out like the rest of them? In their line of duty, nothing was certain. Why don't you tell us about your abilities? The Man of Steel asked, trying to change the subject. Super strength, speed, senses, flight, invulnerability and a few other abilities. Superman and Wonder Woman were surprised to hear that his abilities were almost similar to theirs, while Batman narrowed his eyes at his curt explanation of his abilities. What other abilities? Some secrets are better to remain a secret, the Red said mysteriously, prompting Batman to frown. If you want to join the League, you need to come clean with your secrets. I'm entitled to my own secrets, Batman, just like all of you. Superman has his own secrets, as does Wonder Woman, and you do as well. They wouldn't be secrets if they were exposed, but rest assured, it will not put the League in jeopardy, Naruto explained with a delicate smile. Excuse us, Naruto. Batman, may I have a few words with you? Clark interjected with a smile. He had to agree with the Red's logic about secrets being secrets. I mean, he wouldn't outright reveal his secret identity to anyone simply because they wanted him to come clean. In fact, very few people knew about his identity as the mild-mannered Clark Kent. Batman had found out through means he didn't want to know about. To be fair, he had also used his X-ray vision to figure out the Dark Knight's identity as well. Diana, well, she had been the most surprising one in regards to figuring out who he was off-duty. She had figured it out during an interview. He had counted his lucky stars on that day for being alone with her in her embassy office, since she had outright asked why, and he quote, "Cal, why are you dressed in a silly garb and asking me these questions when you could have asked them on the watchtower?" He knew she was blunt and all, but come on. She could have compromised his identity. Batman raised an eyebrow at the strange request, but complied and walked out of the room with Clark, leaving a contemplating Wonder Woman behind. I'm not convinced by his act. I'll summon John to scan his mind, Batman said in his usual grumpy voice as they stood outside the room. When are you convinced anyway? Clark teased with a raised eyebrow. Jokes aside, I listened to his heartbeat and it stayed the same throughout the conversation. If he was lying, it would have surely increased, yet it didn't. That is still not enough. Can't you feel the weight of his presence even outside here? It's like a huge truck is placed on our shoulders, and frankly, it's making me a little wary, the Dark Knight explained with a scowl. He had faced the likes of Joker, Felix Faust, Circe and Darkseid, all considerably powerful with great strength or skills, yet not even one of them had been able to make his heart thump faster in his chest cavity. Not even Darkseid had been able to make him sweat from sheer fear alone. Joker's most twisted and revolting jokes hadn't even made him flinch, let alone shiver. Yet this Redeed was doing all those things by just being there. He hadn't even moved from his spot, yet he could feel his overwhelming presence even outside of the room. Wary than usual? Superman asked with a raised eyebrow. Yes. Then I guess calling John is the only option. Batman nodded and turned to the wide-screen computer. Contact John. Connecting message sent. The monitor displayed the image of the olive-green face of Martian. Manhunter, yes, Batman. John, we have a situation in the Hall of Justice that requires your unique abilities, the Dark Knight replied. Acknowledged. On my way. Inside the room. Naruto was seated on a comfortable sofa in the waiting room with a delicate smile on his ethereally regal face, sensing a set of eyes observing him closely, as if he was a puzzle she could not solve. You have something on your mind, Your Majesty? Naruto asked suddenly without even looking, causing Diana to give him a puzzled look. I don't know what you're talking about, and please don't call me Your Majesty, she stated innocently and tried hard not to lose herself in those oceanic blue orbs when he glanced at her with an arched eyebrow of amusement. Your posture indicates that you have something on your mind, yet you seem reluctant to ask what your heart desires. Wonder Woman seemed to be rather shocked that he could read her like that. She indeed had a question and was dying to find the answer, but she was reluctant to ask in fear of offending a potential member of the League. A part of her was screaming at her that she knew this man, but she could not recall ever meeting someone like him before. The feelings were just at the tip of her mind, yet her tongue could not find words to describe them. Quite perceptive of you, she praised curiously. I do have a question, a rather personal one in fact. Why are you wearing those bracelets? Am I not allowed to? The Redeed asked with a lopsided smile. Realizing the humor in his tone, Diana shook her head in negative with a smile. No, just curious. Mere coincidence, I believe, Naruto responded and raised his bulging forearm to his eyes to look at the red segmented bracelets. They are quite helpful. That they are, Wonder Woman agreed with a smile. The unease and self-conscious thoughts were slowly reducing the more she talked with him. Maybe at some point in time, she would have enough courage to ask him if she had met him before. I hope you don't mind the attitude of my teammate, he is quite cautious to say the least. Not at all. Would I be correct in assuming that this is the normal protocol for new membership? Not entirely. Usually, we recruit members, not the other way around. You're the first to actually volunteer by yourself, the black-haired heroine replied sheepishly and smiled softly when Naruto let out a small melodious chuckle. That must have been quite a surprise, it was. The door to the room slid open and Superman, Batman and the Green Martian Manhunter entered. Naruto, allow me to introduce you to the fourth senior member of the League, Martian Manhunter. Superman started and gestured to the green man standing quietly beside him. Ah yes, the ever-analytical and faithful extraterrestrial comrade of the League, I'm honored. Naruto praised genuinely. What he said was neither sarcasm nor empty words, but merely the truth. Martian Manhunter was what could be described as the perfect upholder of friendship and loyalty. I'm honored by your kind words, the Green Martian replied in his monotone voice. Martian Manhunter, our friend here wants to join the League. You're here to read his mind to find if he is being truthful, Batman stated seriously. The quite green alien nodded slowly and stepped forward in front of the seated king. It's not my desire to invade your privacy, unfortunately it's the only way to clear your name and to satisfy Batman's suspicious nature, he explained apologetically. Do what you must, Naruto assured with a smile. Martian Manhunter's already red eyes shined a bright red as he gazed straight Naruto's blue eyes. Seeing as mere mortals couldn't see what truly laid inside his head unless they wanted to get their minds fried, Naruto, in the span of 1 millisecond, created an entirely different life story with precise details to properly convince the Martian and Batman. The green alien's eyes stopped glowing after a few moments and turned to Batman. He speaks the truth. Batman scowled and narrowed his eyes at the calm Redeed, still not convinced. The Redeed smile was not of someone who had just his mind scanned by the Martian. He would have to ask John about the things he saw in Naruto's mind. Welcome to the League, Destiny, Superman stated with a smile. 2 months later, Watchtower, observation deck. The observation deck of the Watchtower was located at the topmost floor of the floating station, used to observe the world below. The large hall-like room was surrounded by a large transparent glass from 3 sides. Inside the glass, a sanctuary of sorts was created to hold many animals and plants to provide the members of the League a feeling of harmony and peace away from home. The dazzlingly blue glow of the planet below combined with the peace and tranquility provided by the birds and plants created a very heartwarming and serene environment. Naruto was standing in front of the glass with a peaceful smile on his face. A multitude of birds were sitting on his shoulders and hands, while small animals like squirrels were lying around his feet as he gazed at the peacefully spinning globe below. Being an entity of nature itself, everything, whether animals, plants or birds, were connected with him. That connection was not just some ordinary connection, no. He could understand their every thought and move as if it was conveyed through words. So this is where you have been hiding, a teasing voice said from behind him. Naruto turned around with a small smile and came face to face with the black-haired heroine known as Wonder Woman. Is that a crime? Hiding your face from us is as good a crime as any. I'll try to be careful next time, Your Highness. She stepped forward and stood beside him with one hand on her hip as she gazed at the world below. It has been 2 months since Naruto had joined the League and things have been pretty much the same. The members had taken a liking to him as soon as they had seen him, especially the females. His friendly and comforting aura had proven too hard to resist by any of the members of the League. His constant serene smile and calm nature give confidence and new light to those around him. The past 2 months, never once had he ever looked down on any of the less powerful members, even though he possessed power beyond her and Superman's capability. Quite the opposite, in fact, he had offered friendly spars and training methods for them to improve their skills. The males saw him as a worthy companion and friend they could rely on should they face any hard times, while the females saw him as a big brother always there for them should they need advice, even those older than him, herself included. Everyone except Batman, of course, much to her chagrin. He was still of the opinion that Naruto was nothing but an actor trying to conceal his evil ways and waiting for a chance to take down the League. Speaking of the ever-paranoid Batman, he was having his hands full on Earth with giving the 3 sidekicks a tour of the Hall of Justice. The way animals and plants loved and adored him was utterly shocking and endearing. At first they had dismissed it as trick of their imagination to see a seemingly motionless plant suddenly wrap around him as if hugging him, but slowly and surely they had come to realize the deep love the animals and plants had for him. Now seeing him surrounded by birds and animals as well as plants was a common but welcoming sight. Something wrong, Diana? The Redeed asked out of the blue. Her head twisted around so quickly he feared she might have broken her neck as her eyes widened in surprise. Naruto had this disturbing habit of reading and analyzing your every thought and move, no matter how much you try to conceal it. Why would you think something is wrong? She asked innocently, while Naruto smiled softly. Children trying to hide away their emotions from him. Amusing. Well, for one, you're futilely trying to give the impression of contentment, yet the smile and happiness is not quite reaching your eyes. Second is the slight paleness of your normally vibrant olive skin. Combining the 2 signs, I would say you are homesick, the Redeed explained calmly without turning around and thus missed the complete look of shock and amazement of Diana's face. He was able to figure all that out within a few minutes of my arrival. She had to admit being impressed beyond belief. The sheer analytical power of his piercing blue eyes was mind-numbing. She had been indeed homesick for some time now. Being away from home for so long does that to you. The reason why she had approached Naruto was to talk with him and maybe forget about her home for some time, but it seemed he knew before she even had the time to explain. Hiding things from you is turning out to be impossible. Just how are you able to figure out such things anyway? She asked fondly. It's a skill you learn with the passage of time, Diana Naruto stated mysteriously, causing her to give him a puzzled look nevertheless. I believe taking some time away from your duties and visiting your mother and sisters would do you some good. I know. I'm trying to take my leave when there is no crisis, but unfortunately, it's turning out to be far more difficult than I had imagined, she sighed. Naruto placed his hand on her shoulder in a comforting gesture and offered a small smile. I'm sure that opportunity will present itself soon. But can you do me a favor? Of course. When you do take your leave, can you at least introduce me to your mother? The black-haired heroine shot him a surprised look. You mean you want to accompany me to my home? Indeed. She didn't want to break his trust in her or give him false promise. Well, their crisis at the hands of Hercules had ended before he and his men could take the honor and dignity of her mother and sisters. They still resented and abhorred men except the one man who had saved them. She had not been told of his name nor his identity, only the stories and legends surrounding his name, the legends of how he had single-handedly destroyed Hercules and his army without moving a muscle, the stories of how he had bestowed them with immortality and had given them the bracelets to signify their independence and freedom from any man's authority and power. It was the exact same reason why she had asked about the bracelets wrapped around Naruto's hands. I hate to say this, but my mother and sisters are not exactly friendly towards men in general. I will never forgive myself if they hurt you in my presence and in my home, she explained apologetically. It was depressing to hear a favor from him of all people, yet lack the power to see it through, seeing as he had not even asked for a glass of water from anyone in the league, let alone a favor. I'm sure it'll be quite an interesting experience to see a horde of females trying to kill me, the Redeed stated jokingly as Diana gave a small chuckle. Naruto, I'm not sure if that's a good idea, they could seriously hurt. No need to worry, I can take care of myself, he assured firmly with a smile. Well, if you say so. Incoming transmission. Naruto and Wonder Woman looked up as a screen showcased an image of the magic user of the league. Zatara to Justice League, the sorcerer Wotan is using the amulet of Aten to blot out the sun, requesting full league response. Duty calls, Naruto voiced out and gently released the birds from his shoulders and hands as he walked away, followed by the black-haired heroine. A few hours later. Aren't you coming, Naruto? Batman says it will intimidate the sidekicks to see all Justice League members come to see their not-so-secret mission failure, Dino Aka Black Canary said encouragingly while she stood in front of the seated Naruto. They had just stopped Wotan from blotting out the sun. The other members were restricted by severe handicaps due to the nature of the mission. Not every member could breathe in space. Superman had once again proven his vulnerability to magic, but he had no such weakness. It seems Wotan had expected him to lose unconsciousness by directing almost one-third of the energy of the sun at him. However, he had soon learned that Destiny had no weakness to begin with. They had just returned from their mission and had found out that their systems have been hacked by Robin to see the files about Project Cadmus. The three sidekicks had taken it upon themselves to investigate the facility and had apparently destroyed the whole building. Aina was here to convince him to come with them to the Earth and confront the sidekicks. If the thought swarming around Batman's head were any indication, he had a feeling he would be seeing them a lot. Apparently Batman still thought of him as a secret agent of the enemy, no surprise there. I'm certain it would be a waste of time, Naruto replied with a smile. Come on, I think it would be quite fun to see the look on their faces, Dinah said encouragingly. No promises, but I shall try to be there. Mount Justice. This cave was the original secret sanctuary of the Justice League. We're calling it into service again. Since you four are determined to stay together and fight the good fight, you will do it in real terms, Batman announced to the four sidekicks. Kid Flash, Aqualad, Robin and the newly released clone of Superman, Superboy Red Tornado, volunteered to live here and be your supervisor. Black Canary will be in charge of your training and I will deploy you on missions. Real missions? Robin asked in surprise. Yes, but covert, the Dark Knight affirmed. The League will still handle the obvious stuff, there is a reason we have these big signs on our chest, you know. Flash grinned and poked the lightning symbol on his chest. Cadmus proves that the bad guys are getting smart, Batman needs a team that can act covertly, Aquaman stated. The five of you'll be that team, cool, wait. 5. Batman gave a slight inclination of his head to their backs, the four sidekicks turned around and saw Martian Manhunter with a redeemed Martian girl their age walking beside him. This is the Martian Manhunter's niece, Miss Martian. The girl was obviously a Martian, given that her skin was green. She had red hair and was wearing a white shirt with red lines, a blue skirt and blue cap. Wally couldn't contain the slight grin creeping up his face as he leaned towards Robin. I'm liking this hero gag every minute, he whispered and moved towards the green-skinned girl with a wide flamboyant grin. Hi, I am Kid Flash, that's Robin, Superboy and Aqualad. It's perfectly cool if you forget their names. I'm honored to be included, Miss Martian voiced with a polite smile. The three sidekicks minus Superboy moved towards the Green Martian and shook her hand. Superboy was reminded once again the reality of his existence. Created to be a clone to replace or kill Superman was not a way of life he cherished. Seeing the distant expression on Superboy's face, Robin waved his hand in come here gesture. Hey, Superboy, come and meet Miss M. Happy to be included in the welcoming ceremony, Superboy walked forward and stood beside the four teens. The white shirt of Miss Martian changed color and became a black shirt with red lines, similar to his, except the two crossing lines on the torso. I like your shirt, she said with a shy smile. Superboy returned the smile, albeit a small one. Wally and Robin nudged the clone in a friendly way and draped their arms around him. Alright, now that the pleasantries are out of the way, I would like to introduce to you another supervisor who will accompany you on some of your missions, Batman announced firmly. Recognize Destiny. The computer announced loudly, and a tall individual walked towards the cave with grace and elegance, with such confident and self-assured way that it had all the sidekicks entranced. A heavy pressure accompanied his every step towards their location, however, there was no feeling of malice or evil intent in the pressure. Quite the opposite, in fact, the aura surrounding the tall retard was that of comfort and support. Who is that? Kid Flash whispered to Robin, his eyes wide like saucers in awe. For the first time in his life, he was speechless, and that was saying something considering his mouth ran even faster than his feet. You don't know. That's the new strongest member of the League, he is practically a living legend. He replied with equal surprise. A man becoming legendary in 2 short months accompanying them on missions would be like a dream come true. Superboy didn't care about the rest, only the part about this guy being stronger than Superman had gotten his attention. Could a guy exist that was stronger than Superman? He had never thought of the possibility of someone stronger than Superman existing. Cadmus had programmed his mind to think so. Greetings young ones, my name is Naruto Uzumaki, but you may call me Destiny. Naruto greeted with a soft smile on his regal face. That's why you didn't want to come, you should have said so, Dinah said with a frown, hurt that he had known this would happen and hadn't told her about it. Then again, she should have known that he would know everything happening around the League. She had no idea how, but somehow he seemed to know everything about them. My apologies, I had no desire to ruin your entertainment, Naruto reasoned with his typical delicate smile. Hello, my name is Robin, it's an honor to meet you, Robin said with an uneasy smile, nervous from being so close to the legendary figure of the Justice League. It's not every day you meet some who is stronger than Superman. At ease, child, no need to be so formal, the redeeted king stated with an easygoing smile that sure enough relaxed Robin. Hello, my name is Kid Flash, nice to meet you. Standing to the side, Flash's eyebrow rose in surprise. He had never ever seen KF stutter, but then again, this was Naruto they were talking about. Even some of the more hardened members had stuttered when they had first met him, including Flash himself. Ah yes, I've heard about you Kid Flash, I have to say I find your behavior and entertaining nature to be very amusing, Naruto voiced with clear amusement while Kid Flash chuckled nervously, not exactly expecting to be praised for his joking nature. Hello, I'm Megan Mars. It's an honor to meet you Mr. Destiny, Miss M stated with a polite tone. The honor is all mine, Miss Martian. My name is Aqualad. It's an honor to be in the presence of such a legendary member of the League, Aqualad spoke in a polite tone. His king had mentioned the enrollment of a new and powerful member into the Justice League. The sheer amount of strength he possessed was astounding. He had no choice but to give him the respect he deserved. Superboy was still staring at the tall retard with something akin to concealed admiration and awe. The pressure he emitted, the confidence with which he walked and the way he talked was awe-inspiring. He may have wanted to be accepted by Superman, but now he had found someone stronger and better than Superman. My name is Superboy. It's a pleasure to meet you Superboy. Now that the pleasantries are over, I would like to instate a basic but incredibly essential rule of this team. Always trust your teammates. Secondly, always call on me should you need help regardless of anyone's feeling on the matter. I will hear your call whether I'm here, off-world or even in another dimension, am I understood? Yes sir. Batman was looking at the interaction between the sidekicks and Naruto with narrowed eyes. The nervous reaction from Robin had surprised him, stunned even. He had trained the boy to not be intimidated by anything or anyone. For him to show such nervousness and unease was astonishing to say the least. Even he could not intimidate the boy so easily, but Naruto had done it with just his presence alone. It further proved his theories about Naruto being a secret agent of the enemy. Aquaman, Flash, Red Tornado and Black Canary were looking at the scene with small smiles while the rest were smiling, while Tornado was gazing confusingly. His superior programming had nothing on this strange and powerful force Naruto possessed to accomplish such feats, such as intimidating a whole group by merely his presence alone. A week later, Mount Justice. It had been 1 week since their Cadmus dilemma, and the team was itching for some action. Aqualad, Miss Martian and Superboy were waiting for Destiny and Red Tornado to arrive so they could ask for a mission. Red Tornado was easy to understand and predict. Given his robotic nature, he should have been the harder one to understand, yet they were able to do it. But Naruto, on the other hand, was incomprehensible. They had spent 1 week with him yet they hadn't been able to tell what he was feeling or thinking. The man was friendly and welcoming to everyone one of them, but the constant pressure lurking around him made it harder for the team to approach. When that particular issue had been brought to his attention, he had resolved it with "you'll get used it in time," just like the Justice League and a small smile, without explaining the nature of the overbearing pressure around him. The pressure hadn't lessened throughout the week, though it had become manageable just like Naruto had said it would. Recognized, Robin, Kid Flash. The two sidekicks materialized in front of the Zeta beam tubes and ran to the center of the cave where the rest of the team was standing. "Are they here yet?" Kid Flash asked with excitement. "What did they say?" Robin asked with equal giddiness. The Qualid pointed to a large screen showing 2 points approaching their general location quickly. "They are arriving now. Let's go outside and meet them." The team nodded and ran to the exit of the cave. As soon as they stepped out, a sudden blur and a controlled tornado alerted them to the presence of the Leaguers, Naruto in his usual regal and dignified glory and Tornado in his robotic glory. Destiny floated to the ground without making a sound, followed by Red Tornado in his usual tornado style of transportation, as Wally waved his hand in greetings. Tornado and Destiny. "Greetings, is there a reason you intercepted us outside the cave?" Red Tornado asked confusingly. "I believe they want an assignment," Naruto stated knowingly. The looks of surprise and shock were both amusing and expected. Honestly, they should have learned by now that he could read them like an open book. "Ah, you're correct. We were hoping to see if you have an assignment for us," Aqualid explained politely, getting over his shock of being discovered so quickly. There was just no hiding anything from Naruto whatsoever. "Mission assignments are the Batman's responsibility," Red T replied in monotone. "But it's been over a week and nothing has." Robin started but stopped when Tornado raised his hand. "You'll be tested soon enough. For now, simply enjoy each other's company. This team is not a social club," Aqualid stated with a frown. Seeing as the situation was getting out of hand, Naruto interjected with a soft smile. "Miss Martian, why don't you entertain the team by showing them your bioship and maybe take it for a test drive? There are no assignments as of right now, but I'll be sure to inform you should one come up." That seemed to satisfy the team if the wide grins were any indication. Wally and Robin gave each other a high five and entered the cave with Megan telling them about her bioship and the layouts of the cave. Tornado gave Destiny a look akin to confusion, still not getting the influence and authority he had over the team as well as the Justice League. "May I ask how you're able to convince them with the same aspects they had disagreed with before when I mentioned them?" He advised them to get acquainted with each other, but they sharply opposed, yet when Naruto mentioned to take the bioship for a test drive which would accomplish the same objective he had said, they agreed. The difference between what he had said and what Naruto had stated eluded him. It's an unpretentious style of verbalizing something that has identical implication yet different outcome, the Red King clarified and floated in the direction of the cave, followed by a contemplating Tornado. An hour later. Naruto was floating in a cross-legged meditative position and listening to national news on a wide screen in the cave while Tornado was standing like a statue behind him. A particular report about abnormal tornadoes raging around in England caught his interest and knew the team would be happy to investigate. Destiny to Miss Martian, an emergency alert has been triggered at the Happy Harbor power plant. I suggest you investigate, albeit covertly. Acknowledged, we're just on course. Megan replied swiftly and tried to conceal her happiness. This is so cool. Our first official mission. Wally exclaimed and pumped his fist to the air. Indeed, it is, Calder replied with a smile while Robin grinned in anticipation. Let's do this. An hour later. This Martian to Destiny. Naruto looked up from reading a book to a wide screen, showing the image of a dejected and downtrodden Miss Martian. What is it, child? Sorry to say this, but we know I messed up and thought this Twister character was Red Tornado in disguise and thus hurt the team. They are pursuing him, right, but I know we'll need your help, she explained dejectedly. No need to be so down, dear. Inaccuracies are to be made. It's the greatest thing about being young, when you make mistake, you have time to redeem yourself. Notify the team, I'll be there before you can say Mount Justice, the deep and regal voice of Destiny affirmed. Yes, sir. Naruto arrived at Happy Harbor a few seconds later to find the team fighting a red robot with the same ability as that of Tornado. That would be quite enough. The calm and regal tone of voice got the attention of the team and the red robot as they stopped their battle. Naruto descended to the ground in front of the robot and gave the team a small smile. "You have done enough, team, rest now." "But we didn't win, aren't you disappointed?" Robin asked in confusion, getting over the shock of Destiny's sudden appearance. "Battles are not always about winning, nor are they fought to win, but rather to protect something precious," Destiny explained calmly with a soft smile and dodged a sudden tornado attack from a fuming Mr. Twister. "My sincere apologies for ignoring you, my name is Destiny." "I don't care who you are, you're in my way, step aside or get terminated," the robot stated in an angry voice. Naruto didn't seem the least bit bothered by the insult or the threat as he held his ground with his hands behind his back and eyed the red robot with calculating calm eyes, his lips stretched into a delicate smile while the team looked on with rapt attention. Seeing as his threat didn't work, the robot violently plunged his hands behind him and sent an enormous tornado at the unmoving Red Deed, who didn't even flinch or move from his position as the tornado swallowed him up. Before the robot had time to even gloat about his victory, a blur shot out of the tornado and struck him in the torso. Pre-ec. The machine looked down at his torso with something akin to shock to see a large fist disappearing into his chest cavity and out of his back. Naruto retracted his fist and took a hold of the robot before sending it flying to the deep sea with another devastating punch. The flight path of the robot was filled with robotic limbs and parts from the powerful punch all the way to the wide sea. The team had their eyes wide in astonishment. They hadn't even blinked before it was all over. He defeated an enemy they had spent hours to defeat in a few seconds. "So this is the legendary speed and strength of Destiny, it's truly amazing," Calder said in an amazed tone. "Now I understand why Batman is so cautious of him," Dick Grayson voiced in an amazed tone. Wally was too stunned to even talk. The speed with which Destiny took out Mr. Twister was something he could only dream of. Destiny's speed made his look like a snail trying to run. It's no wonder all the Leaguers claim him to be faster than even Flash himself. "That should take care of it. I hope none of you received any substantial impairment." "English please?" Wally asked dumbly while Naruto smiled. "You're not hurt, are ya?" Naruto asked in a silly tone of voice. The look on the team's face was amusing to say the least. "If you can talk that way, then why were you torturing us with those complicated words every time you spoke?" KF whined childishly while Robin and Aqualad nodded in agreement. Naruto simply gave them a soft amusing smile. "Miss Martian should be here in about 5 seconds. Wait for her arrival and return to cave." "Why don't you just carry us with you?" Wally blurted out before he slapped his mouth. "Carrying you would be no problem at all. However, your bodies won't be able to withstand my speed." That's okay, we'll wait for Miss M, right KF?" Robin interjected with pointed look at Kid Flash, who nodded vigorously. Naruto gave them one last smile and shot upwards with incredible speed, a loud boom signifying his breaking of the sound barrier. Crystal Palace, Throne Room. Naruto appeared out of a large distortion inside the throne room in all his regal glory as his crimson uniform turned to his royal clothes. It had been 2 months and almost 2 weeks since he had joined the League. In all that time he hadn't returned to his beloved kingdom. He had to alter his appearance as his original appearance would have left everyone deprived of the ability to speak or breathe even, as well as his height and voice. His abnormally tall height would have certainly attracted a lot of unwanted attention. His voice on the other hand was a different story altogether. Its natural deepness and authority would have been a major problem in gaining the trust of others since they would have been too busy respecting him out of fear for their lives. The throne room was as glorious as always with his magnificent throne situated upon the pedestal. He floated to his throne with his bloody red fur cap fluttering with a soft breeze and calmly sat down with his head on his fist. The Red King smiled softly when the door to the throne room was knocked a few times. "Enter." The door opened and walked in the ever stoical and obedient Oaken. As soon as he reached the start of the stairs to the pedestal, he kneeled down. "Welcome back, sire, I hope the journey back to the land was pleasant as well as your quest to join the Justice League. The inhabitants have missed your presence," he stated submissively. "It proved reasonably entertaining. I hope things have been peaceful in the course of my absence," Naruto spoke calmly. "Of course, though the masters and mistresses have been quite vocal about you not visiting them upon awakening from your slumber, sire." Naruto let out a soft chuckle at the mention of his sons and daughters. All these years and they still behaved like children, pouting over not receiving the full attention of his or her parents. Just like all other children, human or otherwise, they always waited for him to visit them instead of coming themselves, believing it to be his responsibility to see his sons and daughters. He would have to visit them soon. Else they would be sulking for another decade or so. Is that so? They never learn, but then again children will always be children, he said amusingly, while Oaken showed a rare show of amusement, that being a small smile. "Should I inform them of your visit?" Oaken asked unsurely. The Red gave him a calm smile and raised his hand. "That won't be necessary. I want my visit to be a surprise." "As you wish, sire." May I recommend the visit to be right now, since the servants are starting to fear their temper problems. The oldest master, Master Kurama, has blown up the entire west wing of the palace during one of his usual episode. The damage has been repaired of course, but the issue of more fear and fright is still unsettled. Naruto couldn't help the loud melodious laugh that escaped his mouth when he heard the dry tone Oken used to describe his oldest son, since he was in charge of the palace, meaning all the damage was to be repaired by him. Naruto had given him the power to carry out all the duties, but it didn't make it any less bothersome. Kurama was always the most volatile and emotional of all his children, since he had spent more time with him in the past, but he was also the most protective and possessive. He was the strongest among his siblings and thus had the biggest ego. I believe I should probably take your suggestion into consideration. I may not show it, but I have missed them. But that said, Naruto floated down the pedestal and out of the room with his right hand following him obediently to the chambers of his children. Meeting and listening to their constant rants about not being a proper father was sure to be amusing. Crystal Palace, West Wing. The calm and kind king glided in the direction of the west wing of his palace, with a calm and soft smile on his face, his subordinate walking beside him obediently. The entire west wing of the palace was devoted to the sons and daughters of the ancient king. Each chamber designated for a master or mistress was an isolated and independent dimension, originated for the solitary principle of meeting every single requirement of its master, designed according to the preferences and choices of living of the resident. Though, there was another room constructed where the monarch and his children would convene their meetings. Since today was the day of the monthly meeting between the siblings, it would be convenient for Naruto to simply surprise all of them by suddenly entering the meeting chamber instead of visiting them one by one, not to mention it would prove quite amusing to see their expressions. The massive door of the meeting chamber came into view, guarded by two colossal sentinels. Naruto turned towards his loyal subordinate with a kind smile. Oken, I believe you should stay outside, considering Kurama's less than pleasant temperament. Oken gave a slight bow. Sire, wouldn't it be better for me to follow in case something gets in the way of Master Kurama's rather volatile temper? I have no desire to waste your time by fixing something which should be my job to fix. Do not concern yourself with such trivial matters, Oken, I would like to be alone in order to properly greet my children, he dismissed with a soft smile when they approached the gate. The massive guards bowed to the kind ruler and opened the great doors to the meeting chamber. As you wish, sire, I'll wait for you outside, he relented with a small bow, while the king entered with a calm and comforting aura. Meeting chamber. The inside of the massive room, like the rest of the palace, was located in a separate dimension to properly accommodate the massive residents. The dimensionally isolated room was dimly lit with small torches of fire littered around for miles. In the middle of the strangely isolated room was a raised platform where a large and crimson crystal throne was made specifically for the king to sit upon during his visits. The raised platform was lit up by two torches resting on either side of the throne, giving it an eerily commanding and mysterious look. Starting from the right side of the throne were 9 massive cushion-like structures for the 9 siblings, curving around till it reached the left side of the throne. Each structure was different than the other in a unique way. The first structure from the right side was a bed of dazzling golden sand. Sitting upon the bed, a rather cushion of sand, was a massive light golden raccoon dog hybrid animal with strange black marks running down its body and a large spiky tail. This was the last child and youngest son of the king. Shukaku, master of the desert. The second structure was entirely covered in bluish flames, seething and swirling from side to side due to an invisible wind. Sitting upon this strange structure was a two-tailed flaming blue cat with black marks littered across its body and different colored eyes. This was the 8th child and youngest daughter of the king. Matatabi, mistress of the hellfire. The third structure was occupied by a large 3 spiky-tailed turtle-like creature, with one eye closed and one opened, calmly floating in a pool of crystal blue water. This was the 7th child and 5th son of the Moon King. Isobu, master of the oceans. The fourth structure was a pool of molten lava occupied by a large 4-tailed orange-red monkey. This was the 6th child and 4th son of the mighty king. Son Goku, king of the sage monkeys. The 5th construct was a pool of boiling water with copious amount of steam rising from its heated confines. The massive figure relaxing in the boiling pool was a strange 5-tailed horse-dolphin hybrid animal with 2 long and 2 short horns atop its head. This was the 5th child and 2nd daughter of the king. Kakyo, mistress of the boiling temple. The 6th structure, like the rest, was a pool of sizzling acid. The one occupying this dangerous structure was an enormous light bluish bipedal slug with stubby arms, feet and 6 long tails. It had 2 prominent optical tentacles and hole-like openings as a mouth with its entire body covered in the sizzling and hissing acid. This was the 4th child and 1st daughter of the kind king. Seiken, mistress of the sizzling acid. The 7th structure was more like a massive nest or cocoon sticking to a giant tree in the room. Inside the nest was a massive blue armored rhinoceros beetle with 7 tails resembling green insect wings and a large 7th tail emerging from its bottom. This was the 3rd child and 3rd son of the king. Chimay, master of insects. The 8th structure was a rocky small landscape with clear clouds swirling above, giving off a serene and peaceful look. Laying in the middle of this peaceful landscape was a giant 8-tailed ox with octopus tails and 2 long horns pointed at the front. This was the 2nd child and 2nd son of the calm king. Jayuki, master of the oxes. The final structure was a peaceful forest landscape with a massive 9-tailed fox laying in the middle, resting its head on its paws. This was the strongest of the king's children, the 1st child and 1st son. Kurama, master of foxes. So why are we here again? The ever-prideful and impatient Son Goku asked, tapping his hands in the lava pool like an impatient teenager. I would also like the answer to that same question, Isobu asked calmly. Usually, our meetings are only held when father is present. Without him here, I see no point in coming here only to see you bickering with each other. The 4-tailed ape king snorted mockingly. Thank you for stating the obvious. Isobu apparently didn't take kindly to that retort and glared at the sage monkey. You wanna say that again, you damn monkey. What did you just call me, you one-eyed turtle? Kurama raised his head from his paws and glared at his 2 siblings while they bickered with each other. Normally, this wouldn't happen, since father would maintain a sort of connection and peace between the uniquely different siblings. In fact, the kind king was the only cord keeping them together. Otherwise they would have split up a long time ago due to their differences, like they had first split up when their father had entered the cycle of incarnation. His glare and little bit of killing intent seemed to have grabbed their attention. Shut the hell up you two, or I will kill you both. Son Goku snorted in response. Even though he knew he would never be able to fight his older brother for long due to the sheer gap in their power level, however, his pride would never allow him to submit to anyone, besides father of course. You still act all high and mighty even now, Fox. Clearly our father's absence has boosted your already titanic ego. I agree, you have no right to tell us what to do and what not. Stay out of this, the 3-tailed turtle agreed with a scowl. Adatabi knew the situation would get out of hand soon if the almost giddy expression on Shukaku's face was any indication, since he seemed to have a disturbing habit of rubbing his hands when there were any signs of potential fight. Let's all take a few deep breaths and go through this meeting like civilized people, air demons. Fight. Fight. Shukaku shouted giddily, his eyes wide with maniacal ecstasy as he rubbed his stubby hands together like a mad scientist ready to dissect a poor sap. The 3-tailed and 4-tailed siblings tensed when the aura around their older brother changed and turned to one of malice, knowing they were screwed if he unleashed even a slight fraction of his immense power. Kurama slowly rose to his full gigantic height. His 9 tails flickering behind him menacingly, his red eyes boiling with anger. You dare address me with such disrespect? The 2-tailed hellcat stood up abruptly from her flaming cushion and tried desperately to calm her older brother. Brother, calm down. What would father say if he saw you trying to harm your siblings? She backed away when he turned his malicious glare towards her. He isn't here. As soon as the words left his mouth, the massive doors to the meeting chamber opened and a familiar pressure rained down upon the room, followed by the tall silhouette of a man in the darkness of the isolated chamber. Now, Kurama, no need to be so hard on your siblings. The siblings, except Kurama, let large smiles of happiness appear on their visages despite trying to appear annoyed. Shukaku was the most vocal of all the siblings, jumping in his sandy cushion like a child on Sugar Rush and screaming father over and over again. Kurama on the other hand was seething in anger. As soon as the regal figure of the king entered and floated to the middle of the room, he raised his massive paw and attacked. His giant paw struck the ground with the grace of a speeding meteor, blasting away the ground and winds picking up pace. The other siblings scowled in anger at their older brother's disrespect for trying to attack their father. Kurama, you've gone long enough, stop this foolishness. Jayuki growled in anger. The 9-tailed fox ignored him and glared at the smoke-covered ground. Is that any way to greet your dear old father? A regal voice full of open amusement said among the rubble, the dust and smoke clearing away to reveal the regal figure of the king, stopping the massive paw of his elder son with a finger. The king was dressed in a long white coat reaching past his knees, matching black hakama, a white kimono-style shirt with a few buttons undone, a blue sash wrapped around his waist and black socks hidden by white straw sandals. Long tresses of crimson hair reaching to the middle of his knees, waved and swayed like the calm waves of a sea in a soft wind. 2 delicately thin bangs fell down right in front of his blue shining diamond-like eyes. A soft and delicate smile danced on his lips, giving his otherworldly regal and handsome face a new light and aura. The amount of amusement in his narrow blue eyes angered Kurama even more. You mean the father who saw fit to go to the human world first for 2 months, instead of visiting his own children? Stop acting like a child, Kurama. The nine-tailed fox tried hard to sneer at the kind smile on his father's face, only to avert his eyes after a few seconds of staring into those endless pools of ocean blue. No matter how much anger he had pent up over his father's 2-century-long slumber, he simply couldn't hold on to it for long when in his presence. "Dear children. It's quite a pleasure to see you all again, despite your less than pleasant welcome," the king said with a kind and regal tone, giving a pointed look to Kurama when he mentioned welcome and floated towards his pedestal, giving an affectionate rub to Shukaku's eagerly outstretched head and sat calmly on his throne. "It's good to see you again, father." I may not approve of Kurama's violent welcoming gesture, still it was quite painful to hear that you had departed for the human world instead of meeting with us first. Matatabi started with a large but annoyed smile. Naruto smiled at his youngest daughter with a kind look on his face. "No need to blame this old man for his mistakes, though you are not mere children to feel such irrelevant emotions in regards to my absence. I have given you my expressed permission to visit me in my throne room." Shukaku let out a loud roar of annoyance and accusingly pointed to his siblings one by one with his chubby sandy fingers. "I suggested that, but these stuck-up idiots were against the idea. Though I wanted to visit, I couldn't because of that pain in the ass Okan guy that follows you around all the time, he is creepy." Kurama let out a low growl when Shukaku included him in the list of stuck-up idiots, but kept silent, knowing that if he raised a hand against him now, his father would stop him regardless of his reasons. Naruto gave his youngest child an amused look. "Shukaku, be more respectful towards my right hand. It's his job to look out for your safety and needs." Kurama snorted please, as if we need someone's help in taking care of ourselves. "Hey you dumb fox, stop interrupting father with your petty arrogant claims." Shukaku shouted from his place to the king's right and pointed to the nine-tailed fox on the king's right. The two glared at each other like children, while Naruto looked on with clear amusement in his blue eyes, a small smile on his face. The rest of his children were calm for the most part since they hated bickering, though even they had their breaking point. Matatabi, Seiken and Kakuya were the ever-peaceful daughters, while Chimei and Isobu were his two calm sons. The rest were as hot-headed as they came. Shukaku and Kurama would fight over the slightest of things, triggering an argument between Son Goku and Kurama over the title of the strongest demon between them. Gyuki would join in to prove his superiority, leaving Matatabi to try and bring some semblance of peace between them. Hearing a loud cough among them, Naruto turned his attention away from his two bickering sons and looked towards his daughter sitting in the pool of boiling water. "Yes. Something the matter, child?" She cleared her throat and directed a discreet glare at her two bickering brothers. "Pardon their rather discourteous behavior, father. I wanted to ask what was so important that you left so suddenly towards the human world." Your suppressed annoyance over the fact that I went there first aside, I was interested in joining a group of heroes to see what the world was like, Naruto explained with a kind smile. The dolphin-horse hybrid lowered her head in embarrassment at being found out, though she couldn't be blamed. What would someone else feel if their father left somewhere first after 2 centuries, instead of coming to see them? The term human seemed to have gained the attention of Kurama as he turned around with a sneer, not really a fan of humans in general. The king couldn't really blame his son for his violent reaction, considering his previous history with humans. "Wait, you mean those weirdos who wear their underwear on the outside?" Shukaku asked innocently. No matter how big or powerful they were, each of them weren't afraid to show their childish sides in front of him, even Kurama, despite him trying to hide it with his impassive attitude. "Indeed," Naruto replied with an amused chuckle. Shukaku always had a habit of turning everything into something humorous. "Please don't tell me that you are going to wear it the same as they do." Naruto let out a loud musical laugh at the whiny tone of voice. "Nonsense, child, I never mentioned anything about adapting their sense of fashion as well." "Shukaku, you insolent little shit, you just accused father of that horrible fashion style." Son Goku bellowed in his usual loud and boisterous voice. "Who told you to butt in, you oversized monkey? Why you?" The king looked on with amusement and something akin to fondness in his crystal clear sapphire blue eyes, listening to his children bicker with each other like normal teenagers. He wasn't much for emotions considering his origin, though he supposed he could chalk up these human emotions to his human incarnation, Naruto Uzumaki. He was a tree by nature, granted a tree of unlimited power, but a tree nonetheless. Kindness had always been his default emotion, the rest were all thanks to his incarnation. His original name was ironically Naruto as well, but after he had been reborn as Naruto Uzumaki, he had taken the Uzumaki last name as a show of respect to the one human who truly took a place in his heart, Kushina Uzumaki, the mother of his reincarnation. It had been a fascinating experience to see what the humans meant by saying the love of a mother and father transcends every wall and limit. He hadn't been expecting to feel those irrelevant emotions upon his incarnation, but nevertheless they were welcomed. Throne room. Naruto was sitting on his throne upon the raised pedestal and looking over his vast kingdom, his head resting on his clenched fist. The meeting had gone pretty well considering the sour moods of his children over his abrupt departure from the kingdom to the human world. The rest had warmed up eventually, not able to keep onto their annoyance for long in his presence, though Kurama had once again proven his legendary stubbornness. He had been sulking and pouting throughout the entire meeting, but had eventually been pleased upon his promise to not leave before meeting them first. Oken. As soon as the words left his mouth, Oken appeared in front of the raised pedestal and bowed. "Yes, sire. I want you to head over to the island of Santa Prisca," Naruto stated evenly without turning his throne around to face his kneeling right-hand man. "Objectives and time limit?" Oken asked curiously, wondering what his master wanted in an island. "Simply observe and report back immediately. Your wish is my command. I shall leave immediately." Naruto felt Oken's presence disappear from his isolated dimension inside the celestial body and moved towards the island. He had no particular reason for sending Oken to that island, except that he wanted to make the upcoming mission for the sidekicks to be easy. The thoughts swirling around in Batman's head were only focused on the island, since he had apparently found some reasons to be suspicious. The king had to give the human credit for being so observant, no wonder he was called the greatest detective ever. Such keen mind and intellect would push him far if he didn't allow himself to be swallowed by the darkness of his past. He had Oken gather everything about the human and had to admit he was a fascinating one. The man forced into the dark life of vigilante by the early and unfortunate death of his parents in front of his young eyes, transforming him into a being of darkness, striving forward with the purpose of bringing his parents' murderer to justice. In all honesty, each member of the League had some traits and background that made them unique than the rest. Superman, for all his strength and might, possessed the kindness and patience of a monk. A man sent from a distant planet to be raised by two humble farmers and made into the man he was now. The humble, mild-mannered Clark Kent one moment and the powerful and stoic Superman the next. Diana of Paradise Island, the beautiful daughter to the fabled queen of the aforementioned island and gifted by some unknown power, the perfect upholder of peace and honesty. Billy Bat Sanaka Captain Marvel, a humble orphan boy gifted with mystic powers by a wizard named Shazam. A young boy 1 second and with the utterance of a single word, able to change into a powerful adult. To think an orphan boy would possess so much strength. The Aquaman, the king of Atlantis living in the surface world to preserve peace and represent his people. Oken appeared in the throne room after a few minutes and saw his king deep in thought. "Well. The island is being occupied by the Cobra cult, formerly controlled by Bane, a cult dedicated to worshipping and serving a mere human, named Cobra, who claim himself to be a deity." Naruto smiled at the small show of annoyance when Oken mentioned deity. The purpose of the hostile takeover, so to speak, is to create a combination of Venom and Project Blockbuster from the now half-destroyed Cadmus. Naruto revolved the throne around and calmly walked down the pedestal with his long red hair and cap trailing behind him over the crimson carpet. "Excellent. On a side note, I want you to keep an eye on Cadmus as well as the Genomers." "Sire, I don't understand," Oken said confusingly, not sure why his master would want him to keep an eye on something that was destroyed. "You'll understand soon. Oh, and do try not to obstruct my children's path to enter the throne room, especially Shukaku." As soon as he reached the end of the stairs, a black portal appeared in front of him. Oken detected the underlying hint of amusement in the king's voice and couldn't help but smile himself. "I'll try my best, Your Majesty." With one last smile of approval, the king walked inside the portal and disappeared without a trace. Mount Justice. Santa Prisca, this island nation is the primary source of illegal and dangerous strength-enhancing steroid. Infrared heat signature indicates that the factory is going on in full capacity, though the shipment of Venom had been inexplicably cut off. Batman explained to the team of 5 young sidekicks, "This is where the team comes. It will be your job to find out if the factory is still functioning or not. This is a covert recon mission, observe and report back without engaging. If the Justice League needs to intervene, then we will." The team nodded in consent, though Dick Grayson looked like he wanted to ask something. "Who'll be leading the team?" Batman and Red Tornado exchanged looks of silent agreement and turned towards the team. "Work that up between yourselves. Recognize destiny." Batman grunted when the usual suffocating pressure of the aforementioned man entered the cave, announcing his presence. He couldn't for the life of him figure just how that damn pressure was there. He had followed Destiny several times only to lose sight of him, had put several trackers on him to track him on his private satellite only for the screen to show no signal. It had been hell trying to find out who and what he was during his regular days when he was not on duty. All that endless investigation and searching had resulted in nothing. Naruto walked up to the screen in his usual regal stride, full of confidence and power, an aura of calmness and comfort oozing off of him in waves as he smiled that usual calm and friendly smile. "Greetings, team." "Good morning," the team replied with small smiles on their faces, except for Batman who didn't want to smile and Tornado who didn't know how to smile. Naruto snapped his fingers and turned towards the screen, an image of Cobra and his cult working on several projects, trying to perfectly blend Venom with Project Blockbuster in order to create the new and more enhanced version of Venom. Cobra Venom appeared on the screen. I already have the info regarding the island. That man narrowed his eyes in suspicion. How did you come by this information as well as the visual proof? Naruto gave him a small smile, though your suspicion is well placed, there is no reason to deny the validity of the info I have gathered. Forgive me if I don't exactly trust your information, considering that the source is unknown, Batman retorted sarcastically, though he did lost a sarcastic tone. When the pressure increased a little, the team will proceed anyway. The team passed the unfathomable man an uncharacteristic look, expecting him to show some sort of dissatisfaction for being disrespected, but were stunned to find him smiling calmly like it wasn't bothering him at all. Naruto didn't seem the least bit bothered by the lack of trust. Rather, he seemed more amused than annoyed. He wondered how long it would take Batman to realize that he was not one of the bad guys. Then again, he didn't really care about his opinion. He would follow the team nonetheless, simply to ensure their safety. Outside the cave, nighttime. Naruto emerged from the cave and watched the team fly away in Miss Martian's bio ship with a calm look. He snapped his fingers, and a black-winged steed appeared before him as he calmly mounted on it. The steed bowed in recognition and followed after the bio ship by flapping its mighty wings, flying undetected in the darkness of the night. The calm waves of the sea brought back so many buried memories he had kept simply to remind himself that even he had once experienced what it was like to be a human. Granted, he still had his power and immortality, but still it had been a fascinating encounter. If he had to choose between the different variations of human emotions, he would choose the love of a mother and a father. During his existence as a tree, he had watched and observed many fine examples of splendid friendship and parenthood, yet had only observed, never able to fully grasp the concept of love. He had observed the love a mother would shower on her child with a strange sense of fascination. Why would one human sacrifice himself to protect others? Why would a mother discard her comfort and make sure her child was fed and rested? All those jumbled emotions had only made sense when he had actually reincarnated as Naruto Uzumaki. His heart had bled and shouted towards his reincarnation's parent to dodge the blow of his own son, Kurama. His heart had only then understood the true meaning of love. He had been fascinated. Stunned even to witness them jump in front of him to protect him from Kurama's anger-induced state. The parting words before their unfortunate death had been engraved into the deepest recesses of his heart for all eternity. Minato Namikaze, a man of honor, courage and determination. Kushina Uzumaki, a woman of love, sacrifice and courage. In all honesty, he couldn't have wished for more suitable parents. Drop Zone A and 30 Miss Martian voice sounded through the ship, snapping Naruto out of his thoughts. It seems they were approaching the assigned location. I'm ready. The Quolid's voice said silently, followed by his abrupt jump from the underside of the ship into the ocean below, no doubt to hack the motion sensors by approaching it from the ocean. He watched as the Atlantean used a device to hack the sensors and inform the team. The Qualita team, the motion sensors have been patched. The data is now in continuous loop, move in. Acknowledged. The bioship moved over the island and into the dense forest ahead, safely hovering above a small clearing. The black-winged stallion followed the bioship and hovered right next to it while the Red King looked on serenely. Miss Martian, Robin, Kid Flash quietly exited the underside of the bioship. Naruto smiled in amusement when Superboy jumped down upon them with the grace of Meteor, creating a small crater under his feet. That boy just couldn't control the aggressive side of his Kryptonian DNA. Miss Martian, Robin, Kid, Superboy, switch to infrared and see if you are being followed, a Quolid said through the comm link. Kid Flash lowered his red goggles over his eyes and looked around the forest, looking for any heat signatures. His face lit up in realization when he saw a group of heat signatures moving towards the direction opposite to them. They're a squad coming, but not towards us apparently. There are two of them, it looks like they'll find each other before they find us, Superboy interjected, using his X-ray vision to scan the surrounding forest. As soon the words left his mouth, a series of sounds eerily similar to guns firing resonated throughout the forest, signifying the two squads meeting. Kid Flash turned towards Batman's sidekick, only to see an empty space where Robin should have been. The Red King knew he had to talk with him about that particular unpleasant habit of his. Naruto looked towards the scene where the Cobra cult and Bane as well as his followers were firing at each other relentlessly. Naruto slowly walked through the forest towards the fighting scene with a calm look on his face. Getting rid of this Bane character now would be an excellent opportunity, considering his busy schedule. His sudden appearance from the woods apparently caused the fighting between the two sides to stop as they looked at him expectantly. Good evening, gentlemen. Can someone kindly direct me toward the one named Bane? He asked calmly with a friendly smile on his face. The Calm King created an invisible barrier around the area so that the young sidekicks wouldn't accidentally stumble upon the scene. He had no intention of having them witness death so early in their lives. Bane grunted in annoyance. What do you want? Greetings, young one. My apologies, but I'm afraid you are going to die here, Naruto answered in his usual calm and smiling tone, causing Bane to growl in anger. It seems to me that it is you who is ready to die. Bane retorted in anger, using the steroids stored in the small glove-like device to transform his body into a bulky and muscular man. Roaring in anger, he rushed towards the still smiling and calm man. As soon as he reached the redeed, the drug-enhanced criminal lifted his right hand and rammed it forward, intent on crushing the tall man who had the audacity to mock him with empty threats of death. Bane stumbled back in mind-numbing shock and pain when the bones in his hand were crushed with a sickening crunch as soon as his hands touched the still redeed. He had to use all his lifelong battle-hardened pain tolerance and endurance to stop himself from screaming out in agony when he looked down at his revoltingly mutilated hand. The fingers were twisted and turned towards his wrist. In fact, his whole forearm up to the elbow was twisted and turned like it had been through a grinding machine. Jumping back with a pained grunt, he gave his shocked men a discreet signal to start firing. The silent signal snapped the frightened men from their stupefied stupor as they reached for their guns and pointed it at the still calmly smiling redeed. However, that seemed to have been the wrong action they could have possibly taken, as the bullets they had fired returned back to them with twice the speed and power, igniting in flames from the sheer force of the air fraction. Bane looked on with shock and a little bit of fear as his whole squad was killed, more like cut in half by their own weapons. Just how a bullet even managed to cut someone in half, he would never find out. The Cobra cult had remained silent throughout the proceeding, however they snapped into attention when they witnessed the attack on the redeed and its ineffectiveness. They couldn't let someone as dangerous as this one live, seeing as he could prove a threat to their god. But the silent agreement of attacking the redeed, they slowly reached for their plasma guns, only for the ground beneath them to open like the mouth of giant beast and swallow them whole, never to be seen again. Naruto gave the slightly shaking Bane a look of curiosity and fascination, as if he was a mystery he couldn't understand. How do you feel about the death of your comrades? Does it sadden you? Anger you? Or maybe you don't feel anything at all about their deaths and are more focused on how to survive. He of course knew what he felt and thought, not because he could read his mind or look into his twisted soul, but rather from the expression on his face, the sweat dropping down his forehead and the slight shaking of his knees. You don't live for countless millenniums and not know how to read someone like an open book. Perhaps the criminal had never seen someone redirect someone's attack back at them with twice the speed and power, or someone able to split the earth in half and let it swallow a whole squad of trained soldiers without moving a muscle. What's the matter, child? Can't decide how to survive this battle? Is your strength-enhancing steroid not able to help you? Naruto asked calmly, as if he wasn't in any hurry to finish the battle. Bane now looked more confused than scared. The words young one and child said by this man were truly confusing. The redeed didn't look that old, in fact he looked younger than him, and yet he was calling him a child. That aside, the man obviously was invulnerable, if his terribly twisted and deformed had anything to say about it. The other two abilities he had shown were simply not in his database. He had no one listed in his records with the ability to manipulate earth or simply reflect bullets, neither a hero nor a villain. The smiling and regal face of pure confidence and the constant aura of power oozing off of him were suffocating, not to mention the bone-crushing otherworldly pressure settling on his shoulders. Just what had he gotten himself into? It seems like you are unable to satisfy my growing curiosity in regards to your kind, Naruto said with something akin to disappointment and walked away, causing Bane to look both confused and relieved to have been spared. His momentary thoughts of relief were soon shattered like a fragile glass when he lost feelings in his hands and feet, prompting him to look at his body organs with horror. His hands and feet were slowly turning to sand, slowly and gradually moving up to his abdomen and chest, until it reached his head. The last picture of the famous criminal mastermind was his face frozen in horror, a silent scream etched on his face before the wind carried it to place unknown. An hour later, Naruto floated in the serenely star-littered sky, with the full moon shining brilliantly as always as he looked on below at the sidekick stream to come up with a new plan to infiltrate and prevent the shipment of the dangerous newly developed drugs. Killing needlessly had always been a nuisance to him. Why kill someone who is not even able to harm you? Why harm someone when he has no intention of harming you? Taking that into account, the death of Bane would help in more than one way. First of all, the strength-enhancing drugs would be stopped, meaning no adults or teenagers being tricked into thinking it would be for their body benefit. He was not only an illegal drug producer. He was also a contract killer like the rest of them, assassinating people just to keep their mouths shut so that his dirty secrets remained secrets. On a side note, it would give Batman more time to relax if there was one less criminal to deal with. Coming back to the sidekicks, they had failed at their first attempt to steal or destroy the new drugs. The cause of their failure had apparently been due to their lack of teamwork and lack of a qualified leader. That man had been right to leave the selection of the team leader to the team itself. He had given them the authority to choose a suitable leader from amongst themselves, trying to figure out who they would choose and to see if their selection was a valid one. Naruto smiled when they chose Aquila to lead the team, seeing as he was the only logical and suitable choice for a team leader. He had been the one to safely escort them outside enemy's territory in order to come up with a sound plan. The sound of a helicopter approaching the island reached his ears, he didn't even bother to look, already knowing who was sitting in it. Looking down now, Superboy seemed to be the decoy for the team, giving them time to successfully infiltrate the warehouse where the shipment was stored. That decision seemed to have been the wrong one, since there were some of Cobra's minions guarding the shipment. The resulting commotion between the team and the Cobra cult caught the attention of the rest as they raced towards the warehouse. Oh well, it seems he had to interfere one way or the other. Raising a finger towards the large and strangely deformed humanoid creature currently fighting Superboy, no doubt a product of the new drug, he sent a silent and invisible blast of lightning energy, burning and electrocuting the massive creature to a crisp. The look on Superboy's face was quite amusing and expected. How would you feel if your opponent was suddenly fried like a chicken right in front of you without even knowing the source of the attack? He had to give the clone credit for getting over his surprise and taking advantage of the momentary distraction caused by the sudden death of the creature. That momentary distraction gave the team the advantage they needed to overcome the superior number of the enemy. The arrival of Sportsmaster was an expected but unwelcome surprise, for the team anyway. They soon lost their advantage and Sportsmaster took off with the shipment. Naruto gave the helicopter a sideway glance, instantly lighting it up in flames. While he could kill the man without even batting an eyelash, he needed him alive for now in order to take the one symbol of the Cobra venom to the light and for the pieces to smoothly fall into place. Taking someone out at the early stage of a game was not entertaining at all. The Red King watched as the masked man jumped from the damaged and flaming helicopter with the only undamaged symbol of the new Cobra venom in his hand. Seeing as their objective was fulfilled, the team retreated one by one, slowly dispatching the bold ones trying to capture them. Naruto slowly floated down to the ground when the team entered the bio ship and flew away, with more questions than answers. The Cobra cult suddenly was on the defensive when a harmlessly smiling red-headed man floated down from the sky without a care in the world. The man was dressed like their own lord, red skin-tight shirt, black leather pants, segmented wristbands as well as red boots, long red hair and a red cape, fluttering in the soft wind. Cobra gave his tense minions a silent signal to stop them from firing. He may have lost a lot today, seeing as his factory was damaged by mere children, not to mention his honor and dignity blasted away in front of his partners, however, he still had to keep his stance of a powerful deity in front of others. Identify yourself. One of the minions shouted in irritation. Greetings, my name is Destiny. I am here as your executioner, Naruto greeted pleasantly, instantly putting the already 10 soldiers even more on guard as they pointed their plasma gun at him threateningly. He had the audacity to threaten their god. What insolence. You dare address a god in such a manner, Cobra said with a frown, finally letting his irritation show. My sincere apologies, I had no idea I was addressing a deity when I spoke those words, Naruto explained calmly, all the while smiling harmlessly, not at all bothered by the expected show of hostility, though my mistake could be clearly justified due to the fact that you apparently have minions to protect you. Cobra frowned even harder. I have no need for them. They simply obey me like all creatures of the world should and would eventually. Pardon my disrespect, but I see no evidence of your self-proclaimed godhood, considering you were outsmarted and defeated by children, Naruto stated curiously. It was so amusing messing with these kind of individuals. Cobra was slowly but surely getting angry if the sudden redness of his face and the clenching of his fists were any indication of that fact. He couldn't really blame him, seeing as the man himself knew his false proclamation of godhood. You dare question my actions? Kill him. Naruto smiled delicately and serenely walked through the countless blast of plasma firing towards him relentlessly without a care in the world. The look on Cobra's face was calm, though he couldn't fool his ancient eyes. On the inside, the man was practically shaking like a leaf. Cobra backed away discreetly, as not to appear too obvious that he was retreating from the calmly approaching man. His plasma guns should have been more than enough to deal with a lowly human, yet this calmly smiling Red was walking through it like they weren't scorching plasma, but merely a shower of flower petals raining down upon him. He knew he should have upgraded his troops' weapons in order to properly deal with the likes of Superman and this man. Why back away? Aren't you a deity? Shouldn't you force me to submit to your will? The calm and smiling way he was asking those infuriating questions was getting on his nerves. The calm and curious glint in his piercingly narrow blue eyes was disrespectful. The way he was looking at him as if he was an Interesting creature he could not understand, as if he was an endangered animal being studied by curious bystanders in a zoo, was angering him to no end. I would like a proof of your godhood to see what the power of a deity would look compared to mine. I need not stoop myself so low that I would submit to the whims of a lowly creature, Cobra retorted snappishly, getting angrier by the second. He would not be disrespected by the likes of him. That means you can't do it. I have to say I'm greatly disappointed, Naruto stated with a sigh. The firing had stopped to witness the conversation between their lord and the strangely powerful man. Some of them were starting to wonder if their belief and faith in him as a true deity had been the correct one, seeing as he was shaking like a leaf in front of the redeed. The fact that he hadn't been able to provide a proof of his self-proclaimed godhood wasn't helping matters any. Some of them were wondering just how they hadn't asked that same question the redeed had asked. Seeing the uncertainty in his minions' faces, Cobra knew he had to fight in order to regain his lost dignity. If he didn't, he would eventually lose all his followers. Without uttering a word, he threw his black cloak away and sped towards the calmly approaching man with an angry scowl. However, before he could attack, a firm hand shot up and grabbed him by the throat, lifting him up like a mere toy. Racing towards your opponent deprived of any sort of plan or strategy, not to mention knowing any of his weakness, isn't befitting of a deity. You ought to have knowledge of his weakness and every move before he even makes them, Naruto said calmly, unhurriedly. Squeezing the struggling man like a lemon, considering the fact that you can't seem to provide me with a solid substantiation of your self-proclaimed godhood, I have no choice but to end your existence. However, it seems this island needs to vent its suppressed anger by doing that itself. Naruto let go of the panting and wheezing man as he dropped to his hands and knees, his followers not even bothering to help, seeing as they were too transfixed on the side of the redeed king floating in the sky, his cape and long red hair fluttering in the wind while the full moon shined brightly behind him. As a deity of nature itself, he knew their grief and agony more than anyone, he understood their feelings. The smoke and the poisonous gases from the factory had killed more than enough of their kind for them to simply stay silent. It just goes to show just how ungrateful humans are. The island had given them a place to stay and live without being hunted and killed, yet they had repaid that act of kindness by contaminating its vegetation and land. You have my permission, Naruto said with a fond smile and felt their aura of gratitude and happiness. With his job done, Naruto flew away, knowing the island would exact its revenge as agonizingly slow as possible. Cobra and his cult would wish they had never been born. Cobra and his cult looked on with a confused look on their faces, wondering what the redeed meant by that as he flew away without even looking behind him. They soon got their answer when the trees and small plants of the island were suddenly brought to life, slithering and flickering towards them like snakes. The rocks and seemingly unmovable boulders suddenly developed humanoid bodies, red menacing eyes and spiky body parts. Cobra and his cult felt as if they had been dropped in hell. The last thing they ever saw was the flashing of lightning in the sky and the attack of the hungry rocky and plant beasts as they descended on them like a pack of wolves on a helpless deer. Mount Justice. It was a heartwarming and serenely calm night in Happy Harbor. The peaceful sky above was filled and decorated beautifully with sparkling stars, while the moon continued to shower its brilliant light upon the ungrateful inhabitants of the earth. Soft wind blew over the sea and brought forth within its delightful confines the magnificent scent of the forests. A lone figure sat atop the tall and beautifully covered mountain of the heroes, Mount Justice, as the soft wind blew his red cape and crimson hair away like fragile leaves. The figure was sitting calmly on top of the mountain with one hand on his upright knee and the other on his dangling feet, a calm and serene look on his ethereal face. Naruto was gazing at the star-littered sky with his sharp but kind pools of blue. A large brown owl sat upon his hand, content enough to simply gaze at the kind entity that seemed to understand it. Today seemed to be an extra peaceful day. The sea below seemed to be almost jumping in joy, crashing its mighty waves against the shore with incredible force. The soft wind blew around with heartwarming excitement, swishing and fluttering the trees in its wake. The team was in the cave, relaxing after their last rather disastrous but successful mission. After their report, the team had headed into their own rooms to think over the events that had happened during the course of the mission. The kind king could not blame them for their behavior, they were children after all. Seeing a man or a rather chemically enhanced and deformed man fried right in front of their eyes in such tender age was not one they would easily forget. Their upbringing had taught them to never kill, never take a life, so it was understandable to see them shocked and traumatized. That man had been rather moody since that day. He had somehow found out that Bane was nowhere to be found, not a trace of his presence, as well as the heat signatures that were supposed to be on Santa Prisca. Instead of being grateful that there were two less villains to deal with, Batman was more worried about the killer of the villains, finding it to be above anyone's authority to take someone else's life. Naruto honestly found the man's grumbling and pouting expression entertaining beyond compare. Well, if it isn't my favorite king, finally decided to wake up. A twinkle of amusement appeared in the king's blue eyes as he heard the melodious and outright divine tone of feminine voice in his mind. "You are 2 months late for the greetings, my dear," he replied softly. "I must have hurt your feelings for not greeting you earlier, your highness," the voice retorted teasingly, followed by a melodious giggle. Naruto closed his eyes with a smile and gently rubbed the underside of the nightbird's head, prompting it to release soft adorable sounds of bliss. "Perhaps, however, I seem to recall the sensation of an additional form being pressed to my own for the last 2 centuries." He could practically feel her smug grin. "I felt rather forsaken without you by my side, besides, your bed is much softer." "Remind me to create you one when we meet again," he countered with a chuckle. "Reminding you would be my pleasure, but you do know that it would be useless, since I won't be sleeping in it," the voice replied in a melodious laugh. "You are awfully cheerful today, my dear. Should I be worried?" he asked with an amused smile. "My favorite king just woke up. I think I have a right to be cheerful." "Is that right? I feel honored," the Redeed stated in a soft chuckle before pinning the floating ball of silver sand in the sky with his sharp blue eyes. "I can feel your presence in the palace." "That's because I am in the palace and have to admit, without you, this place feels awfully dull and depressing, though Shukaku is providing me with enough entertainment," the female voice retorted softly. Naruto released a musical laugh that resounded throughout the forest. "Shukaku has that sort of influence on certain individuals. I wonder why you haven't mentioned my eldest, Kurama, in your rather substantial compliments. I consider it a blow to my pride to hear you disregard my children, particularly my eldest. I am a father after all, and a proud one at that." The king couldn't help but smile when he heard a grumble from near the voice and knew Kurama was near. In fact, he knew all his children were present and listening intently to their conversation. "Kurama is a dear as always, but he is still sore about your departure. Some matters cannot be helped." "Sorry to disappoint you, my king, but I am on Kurama's side this time," the voice replied in a teasing voice, followed by a satisfied and pleased grunt which he knew came from Kurama. He knew the boy was hurt and angry, but to hear that he was still sulking even after 2 months was amusing. "I feel rather left out and wounded. You cannot possibly comprehend the depth of my disappointment to hear my children stand against me for such an insignificant blunder," Naruto voiced out in a hurtful tone, a small smile dancing on his lips when he heard a dismissive snort from Kurama. "That was not an insignificant mistake. You purposely left to annoy us." The Redeed King tried hard not to laugh when he heard the irritated shout from the link. "Calm down, Kurama. I am not going to apologize." The colossal fox replied in a growl and stopped laughing. "Nor do I want you to, my boy, though I consider it discourteous to be so loud in your guest's presence," Naruto replied softly. "Well, that was refreshing," the female said amusingly after a moment of silence. "Any chance of seeing you before my departure?" "Not at the moment, my dear, but I may be able to present myself in your service after a while." "Splendid, looking forward to your arrival, my king," the voice stated softly and sighed. "For now I have to resolve a conflict between Kurama and Shukaku. Honestly, those two act like rival wives sharing a husband." Naruto severed the link with soft and melodious chuckle. The conflict was no doubt about Shukaku reprimanding Kurama for disrespecting their father, for not only shouting at him but refusing to apologize, and Kurama, being the proud elder brother that he is, must have taunted Shukaku back for acting like a child. Green arrow to destiny. Naruto raised his hand to his earpiece. "Destiny here. Sorry to bother you, but we have a situation and need your help." Naruto couldn't help the small smile that appeared on his lips. "It wouldn't happen to be regarding the android, would it?" "I hate it when you do that. The creepy bats is enough, but never mind that, just get here as soon as you can. We and the other leaguers won't be able to contain it for long." Naruto chuckled slightly when he heard the dryness of Green Arrow's tone. "On my way. Star City." Green Arrow lowered his hand from the earpiece and turned around to once again face the android that seemed to keep on getting stronger by the minute, only to come face to face with the calm enigma of a man he had been speaking with just a few seconds ago. If he hadn't gotten used to this, he would have jumped a few meters upwards from sheer fear. Instead, it just increased his blood pressure to high levels. "Would you please stop doing that? You nearly gave me a heart attack." Green Arrow voiced in a dry tone, desperately trying to calm his frantically thumping heart. Naruto merely smiled nonchalantly and looked around the destroyed part of the city where the battle had and was still taking place. He watched as a peculiar android with naked torso, pointed ears, red eyes and green armor pants known as a Mazo rotated Superman around like a child and threw him away with spot-on precision before firing optic blasts at an approaching Flash. This robot had the unique ability of studying and then duplicating the powers and abilities of his opponents to its maximum potential. Judging from the techniques it seemed to throw around, Naruto knew the assembling of the other leaguers had made the robot even stronger than it already was. Wonder Woman flew towards the robot and tried to punch it in the torso, only for the android to use Martian Manhunter's phasing abilities to let her punch phase through his body and grab her by the throat. Before Amazo could deliver a devastating blow to Wonder Woman's torso, Naruto zipped forward with blinding speed and caught its robot limb in a tight grip. While the robot struggled under his grip, Naruto helped Diana up with his other hand, a calm assuring smile on his face. Diana took his hand with a pained smile and stood up with a muffled gasp, rubbing her aching throat with her hand. Before she could say anything, Naruto placed a finger on her lips and inclined his head backwards, indicating that they would talk later. Reluctantly, she nodded and flew backwards to stand beside the other members who seemed shocked to see the all-strong and mighty robot struggle to free itself from Naruto's grasp. Superman moved to assist him, but stopped when Naruto glanced at him with a pointed but calm look. He nodded and gestured to the other members to stand back and let him handle the battle. Amazo kept using optic blasts and energy waves at the invulnerable Naruto to free himself, but to no avail. The grip on its limbs was as strong as ever. Naruto smiled at Superman and turned his attention towards the struggling robot before palming it in the torso. The palm strike sent the green robot flying into a half-destroyed building, reducing it to mere rubble from the force. The king didn't give the robot time to gather its thoughts and flew after it with a resounding boom, appearing a few meters above its sprawled form. Access, Superman. Raising a clenched fist, Naruto shot downwards and struck the robot on its head before it had the time to release optic blasts or make itself intangible, causing the whole city to rumble under its intensity. Dust and rubble flew all around the battlefield and winds picked up its pace, causing the members to shield their wide eyes of shock from the debris. When the smoke cleared and the wind shifted back to its original speed, the Leaguers slowly opened their eyes to see the outcome of the battle, only to gape in shock. The area where Naruto had struck the android, the area which used to be an empty and abandoned part of the city, was now nothing but a deep crater with Naruto standing above a torso-less robot. The kind king calmly dusted his red and black uniform and grabbed the lower part of the robot just as the other members arrived at the scene. The Redeed turned around with a calm smile and tossed the remaining robot to a frowning Batman. "I am sure you would like to know who had made it." Batman caught the lower body part without saying a word and turned around with a deep scowl on his face. He couldn't believe that someone even Superman could not defeat was destroyed in a matter of seconds. This was what worried him above all else, Naruto's strength. They had been fighting the damn thing for 4 hours and had been met with failure. Yet he destroyed it in a few seconds of his arrival. Superman was a being he had tried many times to understand and find his weakness, even though he was his best friend and he had succeeded. Well, technically Lex Luthor had founded those weaknesses, but still he had been happy about the situation. He had thought that he found a powerful being's weakness that he could use should he turn against Earth, even though his conscience had tormented him for betraying his friend's trust. However, Naruto on the other hand possessed no weakness he could exploit should the need arise. Everything he did and performed was precise and spot on, in other words, perfect. It was his belief that no one should be this powerful without having any weakness. Absolute power corrupts even the most kind-hearted of individuals, and Naruto was no exception to that fact. Maybe from this short battle he had recorded, he would be able to somehow find his weakness or at the very least study his movements. As Batman walked away, Wonder Woman, Black Canary, Green Arrow and the rest of the members surrounded Naruto and fired questions after questions about the fight, while he simply looked on with a smile on his face. Looking around at the various members, he saw that only Diana and Green Arrow had sustained injuries, though nothing serious. Diana had a large cut on her right arm. Green Arrow had a busted lip, while Diana had only received a few minor scratches on her arms and legs. Before the situation could escalate any further, Naruto calmly raised his hand and smiled softly. "I am sure you all have questions, but you should not let your curiosity stand in the way of your duty. Go and help the authorities clear away the rubble, find any injured citizens and tend to your wounds." Everyone beside Red Tornado smiled widely and nodded before departing to do what Naruto had suggested, oddly feeling compelled to oblige. Diana remained still and smiled mischievously, "And to think you declined the league chairmanship." Redeed chuckled softly and watched as the Leaguers worked together with the police to maintain order and calm the panic-stricken citizens. Governance of the modern world is unassumingly a name to conceal the questionable motives of a man hell-bent on imposing his will upon others. She shook her head in amusement and awe. If someone was to look at him physically, they would only see a young and ethereally handsome man in his mid-20s, but his words of wisdom, full of concealed implications, hinted at something more than that. Naruto looked around and saw the kind Kryptonian watching them from his peripheral vision, even though he was speaking with the authorities. He smiled softly and shook his head, well aware why he was acting that way. "Diana, I believe Superman would like some help in helping the citizens." She instantly understood his hint and nodded softly, though he knew she didn't understand the true meaning of his words, of course. I will see you in the watchtower. But that she flew away with a discreet smile on her face, not aware of Naruto's amused look. The tall Reed couldn't keep the amused smile from appearing on his lips as he watched the interaction between the two super-powered beings. Even in the midst of the ruins, they would elbow each other playfully. Deliberately unbalance themselves to brush against one another, all the while thinking that they were being discreet. The others may not notice, but his eyes had seen far too much, experienced far too much, and analyzed far too much to be deceived by mere children. Superman, being the gentleman that he was, would simply smile apologetically and turn around with a small smile on his face, while Diana would do the same only a little more confidently. Even if one was 300 years old Amazonian princess and immortal, while the other was a Kryptonian whose lifespan was yet to be determined, they still behaved like children in front of their crush. He was not one to interfere in the personal lives of others, otherwise he would have pushed them towards each other, however that didn't mean that he couldn't provide them with discreet words and maybe discreetly inform someone who couldn't keep his mouth in control of their crush. With a soft chuckle, Naruto floated upwards and flew away with a resounding boom. Mount Justice. The team consisting of Robin, Superboy, Miss Martian and Aqualid stood on the training mat in the cave in front of Black Canary. She tossed away her short jacket and rubbed her injured arm, wincing in pain. That damn robot had used Superman's heat vision to almost fry her bicep before Green Arrow shot an arrow at it. Naruto was sitting in a chair to the side of the cave, a glass of fresh juice in his hand, which Kid Flash had been happy to provide, while Martian Manhunter stood beside him as they watched the proceedings. Seeing the sour look on Superboy's face, Naruto realized the boy had been rejected by Superman, again. He would have to talk with the Kryptonian. Ready for training everyone. Black Canary started with a smile as the mat lit up, indicating the start of the program. I have to say I'm honored to be your teacher. I'll be teaching you every move and technique I have learned from my teachers and mentors. Wincing in pain, she waved off Naruto's concerned look with a grateful smile and turned towards the team once again. I'll need a sparring partner. Right here, babe. Wally grinned widely and carelessly tossed away the peel of the banana he had been eating, but after the sparring, I'll show you my moves. Dinah grinned mischievously and nodded at the hormonal teen as he stepped forward with a wide grin on his face. Her smile widened when she overheard Naruto's soft chuckle. Kid Flash lowered into his stance and without warning, struck with an admittedly swift punch. Dinah ducked under the hidden sweep kick the speedster legs, crashing him unceremoniously to the ground. "Gee, that was fun," Wally squeaked in pain. Good speed. Black Canary smiled at the floored speedster and helped him up before turning to the grinning team. Did anyone see what he did wrong? Robin smirked and raised his hand. Oh, he hit on teacher and got served. Wally gave him a betrayed and embarrassed look. Hey. Dinah suppressed her amused smile and placed her hands on her hips. He allowed me to dictate the terms. Superboy snorted dismissively. Oh please. With my power and strength, the battle is always on my terms. I'm a living weapon and this is a waste of my time. Dinah stared at him for a brief second and smirked in challenge. Prove it. Connor stepped forward and stood in front of the beautiful blonde, clear challenge brewing in his eyes, while Dinah simply smiled smugly. Both lowered into their stances and sized each other up. The clone struck first with a fast punch. Dinah sidestepped the punch and grabbed his extended arm, using his momentum against him as she threw him away. The clone hit the ground loudly and groaned before standing up in anger. "You're angry, good. Channel that anger into." Before she could finish her sentence, Superboy struck again, forcing the blonde to flip backwards and kick the clone in the back hard enough to send him crashing to the ground. Erg. Naruto knew the situation would get worse if the angry expression on Superboy's face was any indication. He stood up calmly and walked towards the mat in a calm stride. Black Canary, do you mind if I handle this situation? Dinah smiled and relaxed. No, of course not. She walked away and stood to the side next to Martian Manhunter with a mischievous and expectant smile on her face. She had nothing against the clone, but she was going to enjoy seeing him frustrated and angry for that egotistical claim. She, like many of the combat-oriented members of the League, had sparred with Naruto many times, simply to improve her own skills in hand-to-hand combat, and thus she knew what Naruto could do without even trying. In all those spars, Naruto had simply dodged her attacks with such incredible fluidity and ease that she had been jealous, all the while smiling his usual calm but friendly smile. However, she had been so frustrated that she had cursed and shouted at him to stand still, and he had. She would forever remember the stinging of her bones and the sizzling of her flesh upon contact of her fist with Naruto's muscular chest. It had felt like hitting the very core of the earth, except hard like steel. Superboy glared at Naruto with a large sneer on his face, still angry over his humiliation. Even in his anger-induced state, he knew and remembered that this man was far stronger and faster than Superman. Naruto stood in the middle of the mat and held his hands behind his back with a soft smile. Well, my boy, you seem to think of yourself a weapon of destruction, one who has no weakness, no emotions and ties to begin with. I would like to see this presumably unsurpassable power and strength you claim to possess. Superboy roared defiantly and sped forward with his fist recoiled, ready to punch the Redeed with his super strength, however said man sidestepped his blow with ease. The clone grunted in anger and turned around to deliver a flying kick to his face, only for the Redeeded king to flip backwards effortlessly. The others looked on with awed and amused expression as Naruto dodged and sidestepped each and every attack of Superboy with an amused smile, while the aforementioned clone kept getting angry. Their eyes widened in amazement when Naruto dodged a particularly hard kick and released a soft breeze from his mouth, sending the clone flying into the far wall of the cave. Naruto zipped forward to float above the growling clone and shook his head calmly before placing his hand on the clone's shoulder. Superboy, getting angry is a fragment of your human nature regardless of your half-Kryptonian DNA, nevertheless to let it essentially consume your sense of awareness in a battle for life and death, that's where I feel myself disappointed beyond compare. With those words, the Redeed walked away from the mat towards the Zeta beam, leaving behind a shocked team, a downhearted Superboy and a smiling Dinah. Recognize destiny. The team consisting of the sidekicks couldn't help but feel shocked that the kind and ever-understanding Destiny just expressed his disappointment without being subtle about it. During the course of the team's formation, he had never ever expressed his disappointment in them, even though they had failed several times during missions. But for him to leave with those words, they truly realized how much Superboy's egotistical words had displeased him. They learned one thing from this encounter: never ever show anger or egotism in front of the calm Destiny. No one was more shocked or rather downtrodden about the situation than Superboy himself. Sure, he strived to achieve Superman's acknowledgement as a being other than a clone made from his DNA, but Destiny had always been supportive of his situation, willing to pay attention to his frustrating words with a smile on his face. He never realized his words would hurt him this much. It felt as though he had been robbed of the only thing that made him want to live. Acknowledgement of Superman was his life goal, but he also wanted to make Destiny recognize him, since the man was even more powerful than Superman himself. That man to the cave, 5 hours ago, a new menace attacked Green Arrow and Black Canary in Central City. The attacker was capable of studying and then duplicating the abilities of his opponents. Green Arrow called in reinforcement which proved to be disastrous, as our foe gained even more power with each new combatant. The team listened on with rapt attention, knowing there was something for them to do with the situation, since Batman never ever explained something, unless and until it was necessary. Wow, one android with the power of the entire League, Kid Flash, voiced out in a shocked and amazed tone. Batman gave the sidekick speedster a pointed look. Not all the League, only 8 members including Superman and Wonder Woman. So what happened? Robin asked eagerly, etching to start the mission that was sure to come. In the end, when the rest of the Leaguers were unable to stop it, Destiny was miraculously able to defeat it, the Dark Knight continued with a frown. The reaction from the team was entirely expected and understandable. Gotham City, docks. If one were to look at Gotham City from above, all they would see would be tall and magnificent buildings reaching as far as the sky itself, rich and wealthy individuals driving away in expensive cars or private jets, teenagers running around in joy, cops moving around leisurely, without a hint of evil or malice in the very air. However, if one were to mingle among the people instead of flying over them, if one were to look at the expressions on the citizens' faces, they would see paranoid eyes roaming here and there for signs of trouble, cops eyeing each and every citizen as suspicious, the wealthy practically shivering in their cars, as if expecting someone to attack them any second. Gotham City was what would be called a cesspool of lunatics, delusional freaks, madmen with no sense of honor, and cops with no real power to put a permanent stop to their reign of terror. Thieves, robbers and all the scourges of a society seemed to run free in the city with no one but Batman to put a stop to their cruelties. Cops seemed unable to truly stop the more powerful of the villains, since they were human after all. Even those who were supposedly put behind bars were released after a few days to do what he couldn't do before, except with more vengeance and anger than before. He would be stopped once again and put behind bars, with a few extra weeks added to his sentence, only to be free after a few weeks to restart the cycle of hatred and vengeance once again. Batman, despite proclaimed as the greatest detective, was oblivious to these situations, or rather he seemed to not pay attention to the atrocities committed by the villains and more focused on putting them behind bars without taking the one action needed to put a permanent stop to their series of crimes. Dr. Jonathan Crane aka Scarecrow was one such criminal who, despite being the killer and murder of countless of Gotham citizens, got away with it only with a soft slap to the wrist. He had rendered many brothers insane with fear toxins, while his sister would watch, had made father kill his children by making them appear as though they were demons raised from the deepest pits of hell. He had killed and mutilated countless citizens of Gotham for his sick pleasure and experimentations. He had killed, maimed and dissected men, women and children alike, all for the sake of what? Material possessions and sick satisfaction of the mind. Such men, by all rights, were not worthy of being allowed to live. His very existence threatened the safety of Gotham and the rest of the city's citizens. Deep in a secret underground base near the docks of Gotham City, Scarecrow was busy working on a new toxin to further his research about the many fears a human being would and could have. All his research, endless hours of constant experimentation on the human mind was finally paying off. But this new toxin, not only would he be able to make his enemies see their worst nightmares, but also put a subtle command in their nervous system to trigger the same response upon seeing him again should the victim escape. But this new variation, it wouldn't matter if the victim escaped or not, the effect would last as long as he desired it. Even if the victim was somehow able to escape his grip, the effect would once again be triggered by his presence, meaning endless torture for his enemies. He couldn't wait to unleash this new wonderful gift of his upon the ungrateful world. Hearing the screams and pleas of mercy of his enemies as well as the delusional citizens of the world who could not see the weight of his divine ambition would be like a dream come true. No longer would he be ridiculed by the people for his hideous appearance because they would be too busy groveling at his feet to notice. No longer would he be subjected to the ungrateful words of his subjects, whereas they should be grateful to be the stepping stones to his glorious future. Hearing the blood-curdling screams of his henchmen who were positioned outside his lab, Scarecrow turned around with an annoyed expression on his cloth-covered face, feeling deeply disturbed to be forced out of his thoughts of potential glory and conquest. The screams and sounds of glasses shattering kept getting louder and louder until everything stopped and the door to his lab opened softly, followed by the soft taps of shoes on the floor. Honestly, he could care less about the death or life of his henchmen, they were all expendable, but he was feeling quite annoyed for the loss of his precious toxin test tubes. Who is there? Show yourself, coward. The door opened fully and a tall man, dressed in a red uniform and a long red cap, leisurely floated into the darkly lit room as if he owned it, while the deranged doctor looked on with a frown. The tall man floated into the more brightly lit portion of the room and touched the ground without a sound. Who are you? Dr. Crane asked with a frown on his face, eyes narrowed behind his covered face. The mere presence of the man, a rare deed from the looks of it, was taxing. His every step seemed to bombard the room with an ethereal pressure that was intent on crushing him. His body glowed dimly in the room like the moon shining on the earth at night, while his blue eyes twinkled in concealed amusement. Greetings, Dr. Crane, the man answered with a soft and calm look on his ethereal face. My name is Naruto. I was hoping to exchange a few friendly words with you. Scarecrow glared at the redeed, and you couldn't do this friendly exchange of words without killing my men. It's pretty hard to find such expendable pawns these days, you know. Naruto feigned a confused and somewhat apologetic look. I must express my deepest apologies for killing your men, they were rather insistent in their foolish quest to block my path to your lab. The deranged doctor blinked in confusion at the polite response. Aki. That was not what he was expecting from the imposing redeed. The man stood in his lab without appearing the slightest bit intimidated or scared, a twinkle of amusement seemed to be dancing in his blue eyes. Well, he could use this to his advantage. It was his greatest pleasure to make a fearless and daring man or woman scream in terror, one subjected to his fear toxin. Well, what is it that you wanted to discuss? He asked pleasantly and inconspicuously seized a small tube from within his lab coat before turning his attention back to his table to appear nonchalant and make the man lower down his guard even more. He continued his work without a care in the world, discreetly keeping a watchful eye on his guest. Naruto smiled at the delusional man trying to hide things from his eyes and sat down in a chair to the side near the working table. I was hoping to establish an admittedly profitable partnership between us. What kind of partnership? He asked, confusion and a little bit of shock. Honestly, he had expected the man to be one of those stuck-up heroes here to put him behind bars, not a hopeful of partnership. I'll provide you with weapons, specifically designed and modified to even harm the likes of Superman and Wonder Woman. You only have to provide me men for my protection and a sample of your new toxin. Dr. Crane glanced at the seated man with a fake gleeful expression. What is in it for me? The redeed gave him a fake confused look. Isn't the promise of powerful weapons not enough to satisfy you? The mentally disturbed former doctor let out a loud maniacal chuckle. Oh no, it would take more than that to satisfy me. I'll be willing to enter into this deal with you if you are willing to provide me with a weapon for free, as well as pay me for providing you with security. The Scarecrow waited with a sick smile on his as he eyed the man who, surprisingly enough, seemed to be thinking it over in his mind. No matter if the man decided against or in favor of the deal, he would still use him as the first miserable victim of his new toxin. The appearance of the redeed just saved him the trouble of sending his men or going himself out into the city to find a poor sap to use as guinea pig for his experiment. Deal, Naruto replied with a smile and shook his hand with the gleeful doctor. Would it be okay for me to ask for the potential buyer of your new toxin? Crane smirked evilly, knowing the man would be writhing and thrashing miserably on the ground in a few moments, so it was okay for him to reveal some secrets. Of course not, partner. Cobblepot had been asking me for this new toxin for quite some time now, and I was going to deliver him the first batch in turn of money and expendable subjects for my experiments. Naruto stood up with a delicate smile and shook his hand with the deranged man once more before turning to walk out of the room. Jonathan Crane cracked a maniacal smile on his covered face and threw the test tube at the unaware man, covering him entirely in a light pink gas. Haha. You fool. Did you actually believe that I would partner up with a man who can't even protect himself? I don't need money, I simply enjoying seeing my victims thrashing and squirming on the ground like bugs. His fits of insane laughter came to a screeching halt when he noticed that the retard seemed to be standing calmly in the midst of the gas, whereas he should have been writhing on the ground. The gas seemed to be escaping from him. What was surprising even more was the fact that the man seemed undisturbed by the show of hostility and was actually smiling serenely. My apologies, but was that actually supposed to accomplish something? What? Dr. Crane shouted in outrage. You should be on the ground squirming like a bug. Naruto remained as calm and composed as ever as he stepped forward, bombarding the room with a fraction of his potent energy pressure. I am not sure I approve of your attitude towards your business partners, Mr. Crane, it's somewhat discourteous and insensitive. The deranged doctor and so-called master of fear dropped down to his knees in shock, cold sweat dripped down his body like a fountain hose, every muscle in his body trembled, and his heart thumped so hard he feared it would burst out of his chest cavity any second. He tried and failed to make his body obey the commands he sent, to make it run as far away as possible from this man who seemed more like a vengeful icon of death. Naruto bent down a little and grabbed the shivering man by his throat to raise him up to his eye level. Well then, tell me something, Dr. Crane, do you enjoy being the subject of the one sensation you seem eager to enforce on others of your kind? Do you find it thrilling to be on the receiving end of fear? Does it feel the way you supposed it would? Do you find it satisfactory? The deranged doctor shivered even harder under the piercing quality of the endless pools of ethereal blue of the retard as he fired one question after another. The man seemed undisturbed. Not the least bit angry, but his actions were betraying the true course of his temperament. He hadn't expected this to happen. This was not how things should be going. However, despite everything, he couldn't even bring himself to make his body hear his orders, let alone fight back. What do you want? The master of fear said in a whimper. The retard king gave the man a calm look, drilling his eyes into his Tsukiyomi. Scarecrow stiffened like a slab of iron plate, his eyes rolled into the back of his head, his hands and feet stopped struggling and went stiff like a rod. The retard dropped the man down uncaringly and looked down at the squirming doctor with a raised eyebrow of amusement. This was supposed to be the master of fear. This was the man who had terrorized the citizens of Gotham. Pathetic. Oaken. The ever-loyal and obedient man instantly appeared in front of the kind king and kneeled on the ground in servitude, not even glancing at the screaming and thrashing doctor. At your service, your highness. Naruto gestured towards the deranged Dr. Crane. Put him in a confinement cell and make sure he experiences the grief and terror of all those he had tormented in the past, both physically and mentally. Oaken gave the screaming man a cold and downright chilling look. If the man hadn't been inside the terrifying Jinjutsu, he would have died from the sheer intensity of the glare alone. To think this man had displeased his lord so much that he would subject him to a Jinjutsu even he wouldn't want to be in. Your wish is my command. The brown-haired attendant uncaringly grabbed the shuddering man by the collar of his lab coat and disappeared with one last bow to the king. Said king walked out of the lab and out of the underground base before disappearing just as the base as well the building above it exploded in a magnificent shower of debris and fire. Gotham City, Iceberg Lounge. Naruto appeared in front of the base of the gang leader known as Cobblepot and calmly strode towards the door as his red and cape hair fluttered in the soft wind. It was almost midnight, so there were not many people to notice his sudden appearance from thin air. The door was ripped out of its hinges from an invisible force and blasted far into the base before he even reached it. Alarms went off in the base as a mob of heavily armed men ran towards the door, clear confusion and fear etched into their visages. It seemed they thought the cops had finally grown a backbone and were here to arrest them, but they couldn't be far from the truth. Arresting criminals was the least of Naruto's thoughts. The confusion and fear was washed away as soon as they saw that a man in his mid-20s floated into their base without a care in the world. Who the hell are you? Salutations, Naruto greeted in a calm tone and floated past the dumbfounded thugs towards the iceberg where the pudgy and deformed man was sitting. The flabbergasted thugs stirred out of their surprise and pointed their weapons at the floating man with outrageous expressions on their faces. Why you? The men didn't even have time to blink before the bullets they had shot at the floating retard bounced off his body like mere rubber and returned towards them twice the speed and power, drilling holes into their torsos. The surprised and obviously dead men dropped to the ground like sacks of potatoes and painted the porcelain white marbles red with their blood. Cobblepot stared at the carnage below with wide unbelieving eyes. He couldn't believe it. His men dissected in half by their own bullets no less. Just what the hell was going on? Judging from the symbol of a tree on his torso and his red and black uniform, he guessed that he was one of those delusional heroes. But he knew one thing about each and every hero: they never ever killed. This one, however, was not afraid to dirty his hands with blood, and that alone was enough to make him shiver uncontrollably in his comfortable seat. Naruto floated to the iceberg with his hands behind his back and a serene smile on his face. "I consider it an honor to be in your esteemed presence, Mr. Cobblepot." Penguin couldn't keep the gobsmacked expression from appearing on his face when he heard that comment. He was honored to be in his presence. Was he kidding? If the man considered killing his men in such a brutal way an honor, he shuddered to think what he would consider a disgrace. The problem was he couldn't tell if the man was joking or being serious. He gave his trembling men who were standing behind him a discreet signal to not fire at the man and put a pleasant smile on his face, not showing the shivering of his hands and feet behind the desk. The mere presence of this deed was enough to put his senses into hyperdrive. Despite his smiling and serene visage, Cobblepot knew that this man was much more dangerous than all the villains and heroes combined. "So Mr. The Redeed King smiled calmly. Naruto. Right, Mr. Naruto, what can I do for you?" he asked pleasantly, a nervous smile on his face. Naruto hummed and thought, "I was told by Mr. Crane that you had ordered the first batch of his new fear toxin." "Alright. Well, I am here to deliver you the aforementioned toxins," the ancient king replied in a calm tone. The pudgy man blinked once and then blinked again, his mind trying overtime to comprehend the absurdity of the current situation. He was here to deliver him the ordered batch of the new fear toxin. Then, why in the nine bloody hell did he blast his front door to countless pieces, walked or rather floated into his club like he had owned it and butchered his men like mere bugs? "Should I take your staggered expression as a sign of acceptance?" Naruto asked in fake confusion while the man stared at him with wide unbelieving eyes. "Staring at your guests is rather discourteous, Mr. Cobblepot, some might even take it as a sign of disrespect." The famous gang leader snapped out of his flabbergasted state and smiled nervously, inwardly sighing that at least he wasn't going to die. He could always hire more men to protect his club as well as him. After all, money could do anything. "Well, thank you for delivering the toxins to me. What would you like in return?" Naruto leisurely uncrossed his hands from behind his back and pinned the nervous man with his sharp and narrow blue eyes, all the while a soft smile danced on his lips. "I want your life." "What?" Hearing the threatening demand, the thugs standing behind Cobblepot pointed their guns and fired, while the aforementioned fat man took out his umbrella-like weapon and started firing relentlessly. Eyes widened to the size of dinner plates when the fired bullets harmlessly bounced off his body and clattered to the ground. Naruto feigned a hurtful look and shook his head. "That wasn't an appreciative way to repay someone, Mr. Cobblepot. I was kind enough to deliver you the products, and yet you repay my act of kindness with bullets to the chest. Honestly, I feel used and underappreciated." The deformed man and his thug stepped back when the man lightly tapped the iceberg they were standing on with his boot and floated a few inches away. Hearing loud rumbles from the supposedly still and lifeless chunk of blue ice, the fat criminal businessman couldn't keep the widening of his eyes and the thumping of his heart when the ice fragmented into small pieces and began morphing into something as he and his men were unceremoniously dropped to the ground with no foothold for them to stand on. The previously lifeless and cold chunks of ice wobbled and staggered around, slowing and gradually shifting form and mass until the astonishing transformation paused and revealed a pack of large ice wolves. Each wolf was large enough to swallow a small deer without much trouble, bestowed with considerable but firmly dense ice muscles, dreadful-looking claws, drool of incredible hunger, oozing down a terrifying set of jaws and soul-scorching red eyes. Naruto floated down to the ground and caressed the icy head of the largest of the wolves affectionately, the others encircling and standing behind him like a vengeful army, while Cobblepot and his thugs looked on with wide and unbelieving eyes, bodies trembling like fragile leaves in a destructive storm. "My friends here seem to have some rather disturbing grievances against your hospitality, Mr. Cobblepot. Normally, I would overlook transgressions committed against me since I am a bleeding heart of generosity. Nevertheless, as a fellow admirer of nature, I simply cannot disregard their perfectly understandable demands for justice." What the hell are you?" the pudgy man stuttered out in a terrified voice as he crawled away on his bottom, his men moving even faster than him. "What the hell are those things?" Naruto gazed at him with those soul-piercing blue eyes of his with a calm look on his face. "It's ironic how you seem to disregard the same thing you have been sitting, standing and painting in red with the blood of innocent men for so many years. Please have mercy." Apologies, but you will have to negotiate those terms with my friends here, and considering their expressions of starvation, I find their consent to your conditions exceedingly debatable," Naruto replied with a small smile and gestured to the hungry wolves to march forward with clear malice in their red eyes. "Now then, stay still and let them discuss the legitimacy of your terms." The pack of hungry ice wolves pounced on the terrified Cobblepot and his men, tearing into their flesh and bones as if they were tissue papers, painting the white marble floor with the crimson liquid of life, while Naruto looked on with a calm and composed expression on his face. Some might find the scene and the manner of their death cruel beyond belief, but Naruto knew exactly what kind of men these were. Target killing, assassination, sabotage and black marketing were one of the many colorful deals the pudgy man had a hand in. If you were to take someone's life, be warned that yours would be taken as well. Naruto walked out of the now red-painted club, seeing as the wolves had dealt with the thugs, and floated a few feet in front of the building. Leisurely raising a majestic finger, the earth around the large structure rumbled as the building was hoisted up from the ground and raised to the sky like a balloon. Naruto lightly clenched his outstretched hand, causing the floating building to explode in a shower of debris and dust, forever erasing the last evidence of the famous criminal businessman's existence. San Francisco, California. Blending in amongst the common inhabitants of a society was the same as hiding in plain sight. To be hiding yet still not hiding entirely, to be hidden yet not invisible, to be seen yet not recognized was nothing short of absurd. The concept of such an action was amusing to the ever calm and composed king as he walked among the brightly lit streets of San Francisco with his ever loyal and stoic subordinate, Oken. Wearing casual clothes, a well-ironed crimson shirt, black pants, a long reddish-black coat stretching down to his knees, perfectly hiding his chiseled physique, and his silky red hair let loose over his back like a crimson waterfall, Naruto strode down the bustling streets of the famous city, smiling and calmly inclining his head to passing couples who would wave back with wide smiles on their faces, never even suspecting that they had just seen the famous and legendary Destiny. In these 2.5 months, he had garnered quite the fierce reputation among the villains and heroes, as well as the people of Earth, for being a man of principle and dignity. The love the people seemed to shower upon the heroes was taken to a new level with him. His every move, every word seemed to be recorded and shown on every channel of national and social media as signs of his unnatural and otherworldly grace and wisdom. When he was in uniform, cameras would follow his every move, and yet now, dressed in clothes similar to them, he was walking among them, yet no one seemed to notice. No wonder Superman was able to hide so effectively. Though he had to admit, the citizens were quite friendly and welcoming. He had taken similar trips and tours around the world, visiting famous and nameless cities alike, simply to observe and mingle among the people to better understand their temperaments and ways of life. Being a tree by origin, he had simply observed the people from one position for several millennia before constructing a humanoid form for himself to walk amongst them and see what drove them towards the blood-filled clutches of wars. It seems their drive and attraction towards the dark professions of life were nothing but a natural greed for resources and superiority to make themselves better, more powerful and more reliable than the rest of their kind. Despite all their blunders and mistakes, the king couldn't help but be fascinated by their resolve to survive. Their lifespan was short, so short that it seemed to end with the blink of an eye, yet they seemed to find the courage to achieve so much in such a short time. Coming up with interesting ideas of making their short lives better and more comfortable was noteworthy and admirable. During his trips, he had seen several kinds and variations of the human species, some arrogant and foolish, with far too much hate and malice brewing in their essences, some calm and composed with lights of simplicity overflowing from their cores, and some neutral to all life forms. One species, one shape and structure of the body, yet so different in their temperaments, customs, beliefs and ways of life, how interesting. All their mistakes and violent tendencies aside, he was willing to announce that they had some rather interesting and noble qualities worthy of being admired. Oken walked beside his curious king with a stoic and no-nonsense expression on his face, garbed in a simple red t-shirt, showing off his rippled arms and black jeans with brown cowboy boots as he pinned the surrounding with his piercingly sharp eyes, as if daring anyone to attack them. The ever-loyal and stoic attendant was severely opposed to the idea of his king walking among the humans, who seemed to have no idea who they were waving and smiling nonchalantly at. He had nothing against humans or any other life forms, in fact he admired them for their resolve and determination, as well as their brilliance to have attracted the attention of his lord, but his first and utmost priority was the protection of the king. Walking among them put a major hindrance in his fulfillment of that particular priority, since he trusted no one with the security of the king except his children and a few particular individuals. "Lose the glare, my boy, you are intimidating the children," Naruto announced with a teasing smile and glanced at his subordinate from his peripheral vision. The tall brown-haired man sighed and lessened the force of his glare, followed by a small bow, knowing the ancient king was just joking with him since there were no kids present, but still kept his guarded stance. Apologies, sire. I still am riddled why you refused my offer of using a transportation contraption to depart for our intended destination. Naruto inclined his head with a soft smile and kept his calm stride through the streets, simply enjoying the sights. I appreciate your kind offer, Oken, but walking among the humans offers us an understanding and perception of their temperaments that cannot be obtained if we were to use said contraption. We here to understand and blend in among the common populace, not distant ourselves. Jokingly saluting to a passing police officer with a teasing smile on his face, which the said officer returned with a wide grin, Naruto and Oken walked up to a relatively large house located in an isolated part of the city and stood in the front yard. While it was dark and only illuminated by the light provided from the moon, the house was still quite beautiful and had a comforting feel to it. Without waiting for an order or sign, Oken marched up to the front door and pressed the button before backing away to stand beside Naruto. They didn't have to wait much longer as sounds of soft tapping of shoes hitting the marble floor reached their ears, and the front door was opened by a man mostly in his late 40s, the butler of the house or rather mansion. Good evening, gentlemen, may I help you? As soon as he saw them, his eyes widened in realization and the expression of his face changed from bored to pleased. Master Naruto, I presume. Naruto inclined his head with a soft smile on his face. Good evening, yes, you are correct. Pardon my disrespect, Master Naruto, and the butler started with a pleased smile on his face but trailed off when he saw Oken. Oken, the brown-haired man, announced in his usual blank tone but gave the man a respectable nod, seeing as he was being respectful to his king. Right, Master Oken. I have to say it's a pleasure to meet you in person, Master Naruto. My name is Jonathan. Master Zatara has given me expressed orders to escort you to the living room. Now, if you would please follow me, the butler stated in a calm but pleasant tone before bowing slightly. Of course, Mr. Jonathan, lead the way, Naruto replied with a warm smile as he and Oken followed the butler inside. The interior of the mansion was what you would expect from something so beautiful from the outside, meaning it was as beautiful as the outside. The walls were painted a warm light brown color with welcoming pictures of wildlife, various kinds of decorative pots, and flowers were placed alongside the walls, while the floor was decorated with red carpets. The wizened man turned around and gave the Red King a warm smile. Jonathan would do, Master Naruto. I don't see what the problem is, Mr. Jonathan, you give respect and get respect, Naruto replied with a calm smile. Simply looking at his face, Naruto knew the man was content with simply serving the Zatara family. He was walking without a care in the world, as if serving someone else didn't bother him at all. He seemed proud of his profession and said pride was evident in his words as well as his eyes. The butler shook his head in slight amusement and continued his peaceful walk to the living room, all the while giving the calm Red a curious gaze. He had seen many things in his life, but the aura this man was exuding was something he had never ever felt. He had seen many of the League members in person since they were Master Zatara's comrades and had to admit all of them had unique qualities which made them what they were. He had met the likes of Superman and Wonder Woman in person, even the intimidating Batman. Superman possessed a charisma and force of will he had seen in few individuals, Wonder Woman had grace and presence yet to be outmatched, while Batman was a man who despite being a human had achieved much. However, with all their qualities and traits, not even one of them could come close to what this man possessed. His presence simply demanded respect. Steps taken with the utmost confidence and self-assurance one would expect from a king, eyes filled to the brim with unparalleled wisdom and sharpness, yet still ooze off an aura of kindness, captivated him. Letting a smile filled with awe and interest brew in his eyes, he gave the tall Red a look over his shoulder. It seems the stories about you are true, Master Naruto, you truly are a man of dignity and honor. Naruto smiled at the compliment and observed the surrounding while they walked towards the living room. After a few moments of walking in peaceful silence, they arrived at a spacious room with comfortable-looking furniture, carpeted floor, a beautiful fireplace with a wall clock hanging above it. The butler gestured to the sofas with a light bow and gave them a warm smile of hospitality. Make yourselves at home. I shall be back shortly with Master Zatara. May I ask what you would prefer for refreshment? Naruto calmly walked towards a large sofa and sat down, turning towards Jonathan with a soft smile on his face as Oken stood beside the sofa, much to the butler's surprise. Green tea, if it's no bother. The glass of water would do, Oken stated with a blank tone. Jonathan smiled pleasantly and nodded before walking out towards the kitchen. Naruto gave his attendant a calm look. Oken, sit down but, sire. Must I repeat myself? The Red asked with a soft smile and leaned in the comfortable sofa. Oken sighed and sat in a chair next to the sofa, his eyes moving over each and every suspicious object in the room while Naruto gazed at him in amusement. Oken, my boy, I assure you I can take care of myself should the furniture decide to attack. Despite his tense and guarded stance, Oaken couldn't help but smile in amusement when he heard the humor in the Retreat King's voice and relaxed considerably. He could never understand why the king always seemed so optimistic and positive about every situation. Perhaps that was what made the king so admired and loved by everyone. The wizened butler walked inside the kitchen with a tray in his hands and placed the tray on the table with a smile. Picking the glass of water, he placed it in front of Oaken, who gave him a small nod of gratitude before pouring a cup of green tea for Naruto. I took the liberty of bringing some sweeteners since I didn't know the type of tea you preferred, Master Naruto. I hope it's alright. Naruto took the cup with a grateful smile and ignored Oaken's suspicious glance at the cup as well as the subtle use of power to erase anything hazardous from the tea. That's quite alright, thank you. Oh, and Master Zatara should be with you in a few minutes. Before I go, is there anything else that you require? Jonathan asked with a smile and stood straight in attention. I was hoping to ask a few questions from you, but if you are occupied, I suppose my questions will have to wait until you are free. Naruto started with a calm tone, while Oaken stood up abruptly to put a single cube of the artificial sweetener in Naruto's cup before stirring the tea with a spoon. Done with his job, Oaken placed the cup in front of the Retreat and moved back to his chair while the old butler looked on with a confused look on his face. Snapping out of his confused state of mind, Jonathan shifted for a few moments, not sure what to do before deciding that entertaining the guests was a good choice of action. Actually, my chores could wait for a few minutes, Master Naruto, you can ask me anything you wish. Splendid. Naruto smiled pleasantly and gestured to a chair in front of him. Why don't you take a seat so that we may drink this tea together? Jonathan couldn't keep the widening of his eyes under control when he heard the request. He was a butler, for goodness sake. He couldn't just sit down with his master's guest and drink tea. He was stuck between two options: comply with his wishes and possibly risk the famous magician's wrath, or deny the request and risk disappointing someone who he really didn't want to disappoint. In the end, he decided that risking his master's wrath was better than risking the Retreat's disappointment. Taking a deep breath, and the old butler sat down in chair in front of the mysterious man and waited for the questions that were sure to come. However, what he didn't expect was for the regal man to stand up, pour him a cup of tea, and place it in front of him, along with the container of the sweeteners, before he had the time to stop him. Wasn't that supposed to be his job? What? He stuttered in disbelief, staring in shock at the cup before him, as well as the person who placed said cup in front of him. He couldn't believe that a man who had become so legendary among the Leaguers due to his vast power could be so humble and so simple. Naruto took a dignified sip from the cup of tea and sighed softly, ignoring the man's stupefied expression as he enjoyed the sensation of the relaxing liquid wash down his throat. You ought to share with me the secret of concocting something as unassuming as green tea into something so divine, Mr. Jonathan. The wizened butler, despite his indignant state, couldn't help the chuckle that escaped his lips and bowed slightly, knowing the man was just saying such words to build up his confidence. Each and every word that came out of his mouth seemed to be simply uttered for the sole purpose of either entertaining or complimenting others. Such pureness and kindness simply didn't exist in this world anymore, or rather it was strange and rare to see such pureness anymore. Your kindness knows no bounds, Master Naruto. Truly, the praises showered upon you are not simply the product of your power, but due to the content of your character, the old man whispered in a grateful tone, a soft smile on his face. For once in his life, he decided that he would risk anything to know the true extent of this man's personality. Being fired from his job for being so careless in front of his master's guests was a price he was willing to pay. An hour later. Father, I am home. A loud but clearly feminine voice came from the front door. Jonathan, do you mind bringing Zatanna to the dining room and informing the chiefs to bring out the meal? Giovanna Zatara asked in his British accent. Jonathan bowed slightly and walked out of the dining room to usher the newcomer. After greeting Giovanni Zatara in the living room, the butler had ushered them to the dining room since dinner was almost ready. Much to the butler's astonishment and surprise, Zatara had actually praised him for being so considerate with his guests, especially towards the Retreat. He had the distinct feelings that should he have not complied with the regal man's request, he may have been fired from his job. He didn't know why the famous magician was being so careful and so welcoming towards the Retreat, and frankly, he was not particularly eager to find out, considering the fact that his job may be caught in the crossfire. A few minutes later, the old butler walked in with a young beautiful black-haired teen, dressed in a white corset, black leather jacket, fishnet stocking and high-heel boots. The young girl opened her mouth to say something, but froze when she saw that her father apparently had guests. Zatanna Zatara was admittedly a very straightforward and very blunt teenager who didn't care what her words did to others, as long as they were true. She was also the kind of teenager who was quite clear about what she wanted and how she wanted it. There were few things that she had desired and yet not gotten, though there were reasons for those failures. However, there was one thing, or rather one person she had desired to meet since his appearance and yet had not received the pleasure of that desire. That individual was Naruto Uzumaki, the legendary hero known to the world as Destiny. Regal, unbelievably strong, mysterious, kind, confident and above all a very understanding person. In just about 2 months of his appearance, his popularity scale had skyrocketed like no other. Children seemed to be trying to imitate him, men strove to be like him, and women seemed to provide him with a place in their hearts. There was just something about him that pulled her towards him, though she couldn't quite put her finger on it, no matter how much she tried. Maybe it was his phenomenal strength, maybe it was his ethereally handsome face, or maybe it was his comforting smile. Whatever it was, she couldn't stop the force of that pull. It didn't exactly help that her father seemed to talk about him all the time, praising him to be the perfect upholder of peace and honor, showering the very earth he walked on with verbal flower petals. He seemed to believe the legendary hero was the refreshing personality this hate-filled world needed, and frankly she agreed with him wholeheartedly. Stealing her features, she put on a polite smile and walked into the room in a calm and confident stride. "Dad, you never mentioned anything about having guests." Turning to the softly smiling Reed, her confidence and calmness suddenly left her body and she felt like she was frozen, or rather paralyzed by an unknown force. Seeing him on TV saving people from natural disasters or villains was one thing, however seeing him and his comforting smile up close was something entirely different. Her father had said that most of the Leaguers had been tongue-tied when they had seen him for the first time, and now she understood why. I mean, the man's simple presence was taxing. His face seemed to practically glow even in the sufficiently lit room. His long hair looked like a crimson waterfall upon his back, while the two thin bangs on either side of his face seemed to enhance his beauty even more. The famous magician known as Giovanni Zatara smiled knowingly and gestured for his tongue-tied child to take a seat next to him before turning to Naruto and Oken. "Allow me to introduce my daughter, Zatanna Zatara." "Zatanna, I presume you know who Naruto is?" The gentleman sitting next to him is Oken, his bodyguard. "Then nice to meet you, Naruto," she started with a stutter, cursing under her breath for showing such weakness. "Get a hold of yourself. He is just one man, granted a powerful and an ethereally handsome one, but a man nonetheless." Hearing her stuttering greeting, the normally peaceful magician couldn't help but want to add something to the mix. "She is the one who had been sending you those tickets to her shows." Despite her flustered state, she directed a discreet glare at her father for his blunt admission of her deeds. "Dad." Naruto smiled softly. "A pleasure to meet you, Zatanna. I must confess I felt oddly disappointed to miss your wonderful shows, considering the trouble you must have gone through to get them, but some matters could not have been helped." "It's okay," but she smiled at his polite response and waved off his apology, gradually getting over her flustered state and getting back into her flirty and teasing personality. It was only a matter of getting used to his presence and trying to endure the pressure lurking around his body, but once you got over that, he was the same as the rest of them, but with a few interesting qualities. "But?" the Reed asked with a raised eyebrow of amusement. "You'll have to promise to come to my next show," she finished with a wide smile and leaned forward. It was time to see if he was truly different than the rest of the male species and if her father's praises and the media's adoration of his character were true or simple fabricated lies. While she wasn't an egotistical person, she still had a healthy ego when it came to her physical beauty. By leaning forward, she was giving him and that stone-faced Oken as well, unfortunately quite the show. Zatara gave her a disapproving look, knowing exactly what she was trying to do. "Zatanna." Naruto chuckled at the teenager's attempt to get a reaction from him and interlaced his fingers on the table as he leaned forward, all the while looking straight into her eyes. My, you are quite straightforward." Seeing his narrow pools of blue drill into her own, the normally flirty and mischievous Zatanna couldn't help the slight reddening of her cheeks from the sheer intensity of the gaze. It was as if she was gazing into a mirror and seeing her own reflection with clarity. It was then she realized that he was not some kid she could fluster with a coy smile or a wink, he was a man with experience. Oken smirked discreetly at the show. A teenager trying to get a reaction from his lord. He had seen his king render old and experienced individuals of both genders speechless by simply looking at them. She was countless millennium too young to get a raise from the ancient king. Seeing her back down with her cheeks practically resembling a ripe tomato, Naruto let a close-eyed smile grace his features. "I have seen your shows on TV, Zatanna, they are quite pleasing on the eyes. Standing there on the stage, I find that I cannot blame your fans for being mesmerized by your confidence and skill. In all honesty, I can't help but wonder what the experience from seeing you perform up close would be like." "Thank you," so she probed with an embarrassed smile. Compliments from him of all people. Well, that was certainly a big boost to her confidence. "I suppose making a few adjustments to my schedule would be of no consequence, provided you are willing to make it worth my while," Naruto voiced out with a calm smile. "You will just have to wait and see, won't you?" she countered with a smirk of her own. He was turning out even more interesting than the media had turned him out to be. She was going to enjoy this night for sure. Giovanni John Zatara was feeling rather left out between the two. He knew his daughter would somehow try and tempt the ever-calm and regal man, and knowing Naruto, he would try to move things along for simple amusement. It seems his theories were right. Jonathan chose that moment to enter the room and announce that dinner was ready. A few hours later, a few of the mansion servants collected the many empty dishes from the dining table, while Jonathan stood next to the famous magician known as Atara, as he and a surprisingly quiet and distant Zatanna sat on a sofa. Naruto and Oken had left a few minutes ago, after graciously thanking them for inviting the duo for dinner, and Zatanna had been quiet ever since. "Something wrong, daughter?" he asked in concern. She shook her head in negative. "No, nothing wrong, just thinking." Seeing as she was not going to say anything in front of the others, Giovanni gestured for Jonathan and the other servants to leave the room. The butler instantly understood the situation and nodded in consent before walking out of the room, followed by the other servants. "Now, tell me what is bothering you." Zatanna smiled softly and stared out of the window with a distant look on her face. "Not what, but who?" "Naruto." "Yes," she replied with a satisfied smile. "He was actually even more amazing than the stories that are told about him. I mean, simply looking into his eyes made me lose the power of speech, and that is saying something." Even Superman had not put that much pressure on her by simply looking at her, yet Naruto had done it. It may sound odd to hear a daughter say something so obvious to her father, but that was the extent of her bond with her father. Being the only daughter of a widowed man, they had established a bond that few others could brag about. There were no secrets between them. Zatara smiled knowingly. "I understand how you feel, daughter, even I was tongue-tied when I first saw him. Even Superman admitted to being intimidated by him at first, and he is invulnerable." She chuckled softly and crossed her legs under her before leaning back with a satisfied smile. "Hey dad." "Yes, daughter." "How do I join the league?" For the first in his life, Giovanni John Zatara almost slipped from the comfortable couch in surprise when he heard the question. Mount Justice. The young team as well as some of the members of the league stopped the conversation amongst themselves when the familiar pressure of the tall Reed appeared in the cave. Naruto confidently walked into the cave with a serene smile on his face, his large cap trailed behind him like a crimson waterfall, while the team looked on with bated breaths. No matter how many times they saw it, his confident stride, tall and imposing body, suffocating but still warm presence and his ever-present calm smile still awed them. "Greetings and good evening, team," Naruto announced with a calm smile. The team consisting of the young sidekicks smiled back in return and turned back towards Batman, who had a frown on his face. Tornado nodded in his head in greeting, while Green Arrow waved casually with his hand. The Reed noticed two new individuals, a male and a female to be exact. The male, a ginger-haired boy, dressed in an outfit that was a mixture of black and red with a red bow in his hand, was standing in front of a large screen, showing several pictures of locations and individuals. He seemed to be quite wary of him, if the slight shivering of his hands were any indication. The other newcomer, a blonde female dressed in a revealing green outfit with a similar bow in her hands, albeit green in color, was standing next to Georgia with wide eyes and reddened cheeks. She seemed to have some strange fascination with the color green, since almost everything about her was colored green. She was affected by his presence as well, it seemed, if the way she seemed to be staring at him was any indication of that fact, though the effect on her was apparently different than the others. Naruto walked forward with a calm smile on his face and stood in front of Speedy, who stepped back a little and clenched the bow in his hand. "No need to be so defensive, Speedy, or should I say Red Arrow." Red Arrow relaxed a little, but still kept his bow at the ready. "You know about me?" "Indeed, Green Arrow has been talking quite highly of your skills." Roy of course knew who this man was, I mean who didn't. But it didn't exactly made it easy to be not on the defensive when standing in front of him. Simply looking into his eyes made him feel like he was naked. "That's quite shocking to hear," he countered with a frown and relaxed as Naruto turned his gaze away from him and focused it on the female blonde. He had nothing against the famous hero, but he just made him uncomfortable. "You must be Artemis, Green Arrow's new protege. Am I correct?" Naruto asked with a calm smile. Artemis nodded unsurely, unable to find her voice. "Wow. This is destiny. How do these females control themselves in front of him?" Bolly chose that moment to enter the cave in his own unique way by running and tripping himself all the way to the training mate of the cave. Judging from the way his mouth was half open and in the process of opening even wider, he must have been trying to say something before he tripped. Though, the amusing thing about him was his lack of uniform and a few accessories in his hands. "Quite the interesting style of entry, Kid Flash," Naruto announced with a teasing smile. Kid Flash groaned in embarrassment and stood up with a sheepish look on his face, looking as though he was ready to apologize before he noticed something, or rather someone who seemed to be staring a hole through Naruto's muscular back with a massive blush on her cheeks. "Who is she?" he asked in confusion. I am Green Arrow's niece, Artemis, she replied with a smirk as she tried to regain her composure and control her ahem excitement after personally meeting the great and famous Destiny. If she got to meet him like this all the time, then she would gladly join the team. Kid Flash, never heard of you, he countered with a smirk. Seeing as his work was done, Red Arrow moved towards the Zeta Beam teleporters and beamed away without saying a word. Batman explained the parameters of the mission delivered to them by R.A. about a robotic genius doctor who had been abducted by the League of Shadows and coerced into creating virus-like nanorobots, able to eat and store raw data from computers and deliver the stolen intel to the Shadows. The mission was to protect the doctor while she creates another virus, an antivirus if you will, to destroy the nanorobots known as the Fog. Seeing as the mission briefing was over, Naruto stepped forward with a delicate smile. I will handle this mission, though I will require one of you to be on standby, should the need arise. Batman narrowed his eyes in suspicion. Why? Why do you want to take a mission that is supposed to be handled by the team? He asked with his eyes narrowed behind his cowl and hands crossed over his chest. The team could sense the tenseness in the room, even the normally impassive and emotionless Tornado felt oddly uncomfortable to be in the cave. Naruto turned around with a soft but calm smile on his face. Is there a specific reason behind your question, Batman? The Dark Knight could have sworn the pressure in the room intensified a little with the utterance of the question, but he composed himself and calmly shook his head no. Splendid, Destiny replied with a smile. Robin will stay back should I require assistance. Miss Martian, reconfigure the bioship so that Robin can navigate it when I call. Yes, sir. Robin exclaimed with a wide grin. Working with Destiny on a two-man team was like a dream come true. Kid Flash, Superboy, Miss Martian and Artemis, you four will handle a new mission if you are willing to take it, he announced with a calm smile and ignored Batman's sour expression. The team nodded eagerly and stood in attention. We are. Yes, Artemis blurted out before slapping her mouth in embarrassment. I mean yes. Great, my first meeting with that gorgeous hunk and I made a fool of myself. The blonde archer lamented in depression. It didn't help that her so-called uncle was giving her teasing looks. Outstanding. The Reed turned to a motionless red tornado. Kindly explain the parameters of the mission to them and give them the key to the Tower of Fate. As you wish, she replied impassively. Naruto nodded in satisfaction and beamed away through the Zeta beam, leaving behind a frowning Batman and an eager team. Happy Harbor, nighttime. Dr. Serling Riquette, a blonde woman in her early 30s, a brilliant scientist, a renowned nanorobotic genius, proud mother of one son, but at the moment a speechless woman, staring at the legendary imposing figure of the League's recent and notoriously famous hero, Destiny. Sure, when she had been rescued by that Red Arrow guy, she knew they would provide her with the security necessary for her to properly get the job done, but she hadn't been exactly expecting him to come down here and protect her. To be honest, she had been expecting teenagers similar to the one who had rescued her from the ruthless clutches of the League of Shadows on Infinity Island and had mentally prepared herself to be enwhited to death, but what or rather who she was staring at the moment was completely and utterly unexpected. It was one thing seeing him fighting and dispatching villains with ease on TV, but seeing him and standing in front of him in person was way out of this world. She had seen a lot of influential individuals who could render people speechless by simply glaring at them like Batman, and some who could tongue-tie the mass by simply being there like Superman, while some who could captivate the attention of the people by her otherworldly beauty alone like Wonder Woman. However, this individual standing before her was the only person she knew who could render your entire being paralyzed by simply smiling down at you. And by smiling down at you, she literally meant it, since his height was something even Superman could not brag about. His imposing height and intimidating body mass screamed nothing but power and might, yet the smile on his face was bright enough to put the light of the moon to shame. His presence said one thing, not said but practically screamed it, yet his smile and aura said another. He was there and yet not entirely there, his presence was everywhere in the small computer lab, yet nowhere at all. It was as if the being standing before her was nothing but an illusion, but one with the presence of a physical being. It was all so confusing. Naruto inclined his head with a soft smile and calmly extended his hand towards the wary Dr. Serling. It's quite a pleasure to meet you, I must say. Stealing her features, she smiled nervously and shook Naruto's hand with shaky hands. Nice to meet you, Destiny, my son is a fan of your heroism. The delicate red eyebrow rose in amusement. Ah, you must be talking about young Scott Riquette. Her eyes widened in surprise. He knew about her son. You know.